Anybody who watched my draft content knows how much I loved David Walker coming out, so I'm going to do my best not to cry today. Welcome in, everybody, to the reveal of the number 6 team in my power rankings as we head into the start of the 2025 NFL season. I know we haven't done number 7 yet in this countdown. We have a wonderful interview today with Trevor Sikkema to talk about his Tampa Bay Buccaneers. For those that have watched this series, know I have endured quite the curse of dropping the video and then either a big transaction or a big injury happens, or it happens before I post the video. So I wanted to get this video out with that interview already in the books before anything changes with this Bucs team. Maybe I'm scarred, but we will do number 7 next. But without further ado, let's get into this Bucs deep dive. A fascinating team that was a much better football team than I thought they would be heading into last season, but a team that definitely dealt with a lot of injuries as well that held them back from being the best version of themselves. And getting a lot of those core pieces back healthy this year, I think maybe makes this team a little underrated. I know I'm a bit higher on this Bucs team, which all of that's going to make it very fun to break this team down. Before we do get started, make sure you do hit that like button. It really does help me out. Make sure you subscribe as well so you don't miss our remaining deep dives in this countdown. And then make sure you stick around towards the end of the video so you do not miss that interview with Trevor Sikkema, our good friend from PFF and the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, an interview you are not going to want to miss. But let's go ahead and get started. In this series, we go through all of the position groups as well as the coaching staff and begin each of those chapters by taking a look at their offseason changes at that spot, asking whether they got better, worse, or stayed the same. And we start by talking about this Bucs coaching staff, who is going to see another change at the offensive coordinator spot as Liam Cohen gets the head coaching job with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Kind of pulled a fast one on this Bucs team. They thought he was going to stay for another year, but the Jags, who wanted him very badly, ended up deciding, you know what, we will fire Trent Baalke for you, Liam, if you do take this job, and that's what happened. So for the 3rd year in a row, really the 4th year in a row, the Bucs are, going to a new offensive coordinator. Baker Mayfield continues his streak, I believe, of having a different offensive coordinator in every single season of his pro career. That is, when people ask, what is the craziest sports stat you've heard? That is up there, assuming that is still accurate. I believe it is. Bucs fans can let us know in the comments below, I'm sure. But Josh Grizzard will take over as the offensive coordinator here. This is going to be one of the big questions on this team this year. Liam Cohen did a great job last year. It's going to be some big shoes for Josh Grizzard to fill. I did say likely downgraded with the coaching staff there on the offensive side of things, of course, which, to be fair, we said that last year. So we also put that yellow-coded to be determined. There is definitely reason to believe that Josh Grizzard can be just fine here as well. But let's break down this coaching staff with Todd Bowles at the helm. And I think Todd Bowles is a very good NFL head coach. I think coming off the heels of doing the Vikings and 49ers deep dives with Kevin O'Connell and Shanahan and both those offensive-minded head coaches with excellent defensive coordinators in place, this staff can maybe leave a little bit to be desired when you start comparing these kind of, top ranking teams. But that does not mean that Todd Bowles is a bad head coach, that the Bucs are not in good hands. For me, I've got Todd Bowles ranking as my 15th overall head coach as we head into the start of this season. I think especially he's done an excellent job of building and sustaining a winning culture in Tampa Bay. If you talk about this being an organization that I think has earned some benefit of the doubt, I think Todd Bowles has been a part of that. I think he runs a very good program in Tampa. But at the same time, these Bucs defenses have been kind of good, not great. They've certainly been streaky at times. And really since they won the Super Bowl with Bowles as the defensive coordinator and Bruce Arians as the head coach, where Bowles was able to solely focus on his defense. And they, to be fair, did have a remarkable roster when you go back and look at that, Tom Brady championship team. But this defense hasn't necessarily been perfect, especially in terms of pass defense. This has been a Bucs defense that you've been able to throw against for the better part of 2.5 years here. They have sustained as a just remarkable run defense. Todd Bowles has always put a premium on stopping the run and really understands how to build his fronts and coach run defense. So that is all reflected in sort of my rankings on Todd Bowles. If you talk about the team culture rating that I give all these teams, the Bucs rank 6th to 13th there. And then when you look at the defensive coaching rankings, 13th to 21st with a B grade on pass defense coaching. So still good, but certainly not standout or exceptional, but definitely at the top of the league for run defense coaching with an A grade there. Tied for first, ranking 1st to 4th. And that's been kind of reflected in their overall results. Like last year, they were still 6th in run defense DVOA while being 23rd in pass defense. The year before that, in 2023, still inside the top 10 for run defense, ranking 8th there, but 14th in pass defense. So they have been better against the run than the pass, especially in recent seasons. But going back to that, like 2022, type of year, they were elite of the elite against the run. You could not run on these Bucs. So ultimately, I do think Todd Bowles is a good head coach and a very good defensive coach. But there have been some raising questions about should he be kind of a hot seat type of head coach? Is he the best for the future of the Buccaneers? I think it's a fair question. I think this is going to be a big year for that. I'm not ready to say Todd Bowles is on the hot seat, but this team should have some pretty major expectations this year. If they don't get this team kind of inside the top 10 of your final defensive rankings, I think we can start to have some very serious conversations there. Like I said, when you compare this staff to other, championship caliber staffs, I think it is fair to raise the questions of, is this the best setup for Tampa, where seemingly every year they're looking for a new offensive coordinator because that guy is off getting head coaching jobs elsewhere? If Todd Bowles isn't going to be an elite defensive mind, are the Bucs going to put themselves in the best possible situation to win a Super Bowl? I think it's a very fair question. There's a lot of Sean McDermott to this coaching staff here, but I'm willing to give this one more year to see how this season plays out, and then maybe next year's deep dive, we can have some more serious conversations regarding should Todd Bowles be on the hot seat or anything like that. But I did want to bring that up because there's a lot of people that will raise that question with him here. Now, I do want to talk about his assistant on the defensive side of the ball with Larry Foote, as well as what the scheme looks like defensively before we bounce over to the offensive side of things. So not going to spend too much time here because this is Todd Bowles' defense, but Larry Foote is a bit of a rising name. I wouldn't say he's climbing the ranks of like head coach candidates, but he did interview for the Lions defensive coordinator position. I think, a young mind that has learned this Todd Bowles defense, has learned how to coach underneath Todd Bowles for a long time now. Definitely a name to keep an eye on, at least as someone that they are clearly open to the idea of like letting him go get a defensive coordinator position elsewhere where it would be his defense. But definitely just a name to keep an eye on and someone that has gained some respect around the league here as a part of this staff. But yeah, scheme-wise, things haven't changed too much here in Tampa. This is a very blitz-heavy defense. Tampa was second in blitz rate last season. It's going to be mostly kind of 3-3 fire zones and cover one man blitzes along with a decent amount of cover zero, not a crazy amount of zero blitzes. But yeah, Todd Bowles likes to get after it. He likes to run that kind of 3-4 style front where the edge rushers can drop into coverage, which you can kind of create that phantom pressure where you get lines to slide towards the direction you think the blitz is heading towards, and then you slide into an edge rusher that just dropped into coverage, and then you're outnumbered on the backside of the blitz, that type of stuff. Bowles is very good at designing his blitz game. I will say it feels like it's become a little bit more predictable, like not changing up tendencies and the types of blitzes he likes to run. It feels like there's a lot of tape out on the stuff that he likes to do, and teams have been much better at picking up their blitzes. Maybe that's inaccurate, but just having watched all of the Bucs games, that's kind of what it feels like. I would be curious if Bucs fans maybe feel the same way there. But yeah, not expecting a ton of variation from really their blitz rates and the types of coverages they want to run, which when they're not blitzing, they run a very balanced kind of approach on the back end. They're pretty much down the middle in terms of like every coverage that you can look at. The only one that they weren't inside the top 20 for was cover 6. They were 27th in terms of percentage of cover 6 ran. And I should say balanced from a zone perspective, because they were actually very close to the bottom in man coverage last year as well. They ran the 28th least man coverage last year. They've spent other years much closer to like top 20. They're not a Superman heavy defense. They suffered some injuries in the secondary last year, so they probably weren't as comfortable running man to man. So that might come up with some better corners here. It could be a big part of them investing pretty heavily in that group in the draft there. But yeah, just generally speaking, if they aren't blitzing, which is fairly rare, they're going to balance out their defenses on the back end, try to be a little bit more unpredictable in that sense. So that's good. But again, they just got to get better results from their pass defense than what they got last year, where they were 23rd in pass defense last season. But run game wise, this scheme does the trick. Bowles is not afraid to load up the box, play base defense when necessary, but he'll come out usually with that 5-man front, leaning into having a Vita Vea as a nose tackle there to plug gaps and make plays, facing double teams as a nose tackle. It's a big part of it, but they run a lot of slants and games and twists up front too to kind of cause chaos at the line of scrimmage. They'll blitz into the run as well, kind of stop the run on the way to the quarterback. So they do a lot of good stuff, schematically speaking, to stop the run as well. But yeah, there is your defensive breakdown. Let's talk about Josh Grizzard stepping in as the offensive coordinator. And we do ask Trevor about Josh Grizzard and his expectations there as well. So there's even more meat on the bones there in that conversation later on in the video. But yeah, this is case number 500 of a Shanahan-McVay tree disciple getting his opportunity to call plays around the league. And even here in Tampa, they have had a lot of success with the Dave Canales hire, with the Liam Cohen hire, now going with Josh Grizzard, who spent the majority of his time in Miami, but was here last year in Tampa Bay. So he gets the promotion here. And again, this is very similar to what we've said about all of these other Shanahan disciples around the league, where really no reason to believe this won't work. In fact, similar process has led to Cohen and Canales getting head coaching jobs after their first year here in Tampa. But still someone that has to prove that he can step in, run the offense under his own wing, and push the right buttons at the same time as those previous two guys did. So when you talk about ranking the coaching for the Bucs here on the offensive side of things, just unproven but solid rankings. C+ grades both in the pass game and the run game. So 22nd to 30th for pass game coaching, 19th to 27th for run game coaching. And as well, this is definitely one of those wild card items for this Bucs in this deep dive. We use that wild card indicator to really highlight the big question marks for the team, where if that player or coach in this case can hit a green light and go in the right direction, that's going to go a long way towards this team being the best version of themselves. So it really is just to be determined in terms of how good Josh Grizzard is, but nothing wrong with the process here. And I think we are talking about a very qualified candidate here who spent a couple years under Mike McDaniel, really learning that kind of Shanahan-McDaniel blended unique offense in Miami, was here next to Liam Cohen last year. And he even spent many years under other coaches as well in Miami before Mike McDaniel got there. There's a little bit of Kevin Stefanski to his resume. Stefanski, similarly in Minnesota, was just kind of hanging out underneath a bunch of coordinators and head coaches that were ahead of him, and he just kind of stayed on that staff and learned a bunch. And then eventually a Shanahan-style coach in Gary Kubiak came in, and Stefanski absorbed that offense, and now to this day runs very much that Shanahan-style scheme. There's a lot of that with Josh Grizzard, so I'm excited to see what he can do here. Obviously, schematically speaking, we are very much expecting a continuation of what this Bucs team has been doing for the last couple of years with Baker here, which is going to be that Shanahan-McVay under center play-action-oriented attack. Last year, Tampa really figured out the run game finally, like this team has not been able to run the ball going back to when they had Tom Brady, even in a completely different system. But Canales couldn't figure out how to run the ball here. Liam Cohen did with Josh Grizzard next to him here. They became a much more varied approach, bringing in more gap and pin and pull counter type of runs to the table as opposed to just smashing wide zone like it felt like they did with Canales. And that was a big part of their success running the ball. So I'm definitely expecting a continuation of that, especially when you talk about Grizzard bringing in some of those Miami influences. That is one of the most creative, unique run games in the entire league. I'm very curious to see now with Grizzard's full control of this offense, just how much of that Mike McDaniel inspiration does he want to bring to the table here? And what does that mean for this offense? Is it a good thing? Does it open up even more explosiveness with someone like Bucky Irving now emerging as a star running back? Or does it cause some more confusion and they get some more missed assignments and the run game takes a step back? We will see, but like I said, very good process. We'll see how Josh Grizzard pans out here. And that rounds out our coach and scheme conversation on the Tampa Bay Bucs. Should be in pretty good hands, even if now that we're getting towards the top of the league here with these discussions, this staff doesn't quite stack up with some of the other ones we're going to be, right in this range in terms of team rankings and stuff. But let's go ahead and move forward and get into the roster breakdown on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We'll start at quarterback, and really no significant changes. This offseason, they did add Teddy Bridgewater, who is coaching high school ball in Florida. So that's a fun addition. I see him as more of a coach than a player here. I don't even know that he's going to be the second QB off the bench with Kyle Trask there. I guess we'll see, but definitely feels like Teddy could be one of these quickly ascending young offensive coaches, former quarterbacks. There's a lot of those guys around the league right now. Kellen Moore comes to the forefront there, but Kevin O'Connell as well kind of took that path. So something to keep an eye on, whether that's becoming a coach here in Tampa after this season. I don't think he would make the jump if Josh Grizzard becomes a head coach after this year. I don't think Teddy would be the offensive coordinator for the Bucs next year, but let's say Grizzard stays here for 2 years. Could it go that route where Teddy goes from backup quarterback to quarterback's coach next year to offensive coordinator in 2028? Something to keep an eye on at least. But anyway, let's get into the discussion on Baker Mayfield and how we rank the quarterback here. So I have Baker, as we head into this season, as the 11th overall quarterback. I think he's done just such a good job to settle back down as a sort of top 12 QB or so, which is, I think you look at, whatever that one really good year was in Cleveland when they went to the playoffs, that's right around the range I had him back at that time, and then it just obviously just fell off a cliff. But been really fun to see him climb all the way back up. And heading into last year with their deep dive, I had some, caution with Baker in terms of, he was kind of okay for the first half in Tampa in that 2023 season, and then played really hot at the end of the year, looked awesome, gets the contract extension. It was kind of where is he going to land? Did he just get hot, or is Baker back? And Baker's back, baby. So outside of that, I feel good about where he's at now. I don't have those questions as we head into 2025. And I don't have a ton of other hot takes beside that. I think he's towards the top of your tier 3 quarterbacks, which are really good QBs, worth paying, guys that if you put the right infrastructure around, you're going to put yourself in a position to compete for a Super Bowl. Is he elite? Is he the most consistent player in the league? Can you expect maybe a couple hiccup performances on and off? Yeah, I think so. If he can really settle in here with even more continuity with this team, I know the coordinators change all the time, but the scheme is relatively similar. Yeah, there's a world where he climbs into being viewed as more of a top 8 or 9 tier 2 type of quarterback. That's just going to have to come down to the mentals and the consistency side of things. I think the QB discourse is flawed at times out there, where sometimes we take the Baker Mayfields of the world and just lock him in at where he's at and say he's never going to get better. The longer you stay in the same spot and stay with, again, the scheme changes a little bit, but it's mostly the same offense here. The better and better understanding of your offense you can have, the more confidence and consistency you can play with, eliminate those negative plays more and more every year, eliminate the amount of negative performances you have, then you can start to look back on a collection of seasons and say, damn, like that quarterback really has arrived as a championship caliber tier 2 quarterback. That's possible with Baker Mayfield. We'll continue to kind of evaluate that. There's really no limiting traits on him. He's got a super strong arm. He extends plays extremely well. He's got a good sense in the pocket for when he's about to get sacked and how to get out of sacks. He's very strong. He's very underrated in the sense of like how he's built like a running back, and he can break sacks. He can even break tackles when he does scramble. He's got adequate speed. He's certainly not the fastest QB in the world, but he's got enough. And then he's pretty damn accurate too. Like I think there are sprays on tape, but for the most part, I would say he's top 10 in terms of accuracy for quarterbacks in the league, at worst top 15. So there's just a lot to like with Baker Mayfield, and they're in a very good spot with him. There was a world last year where, you know, he played closer to the end of his Cleveland career, or things obviously didn't work out with him in like Carolina either. There was a world where he regressed, and that didn't happen. He totally settled back in. So I just don't have a ton else to say, a ton of hot takes on Baker Mayfield. I think they're hoping he can continue to play at a really good level, that they can build an awesome team around him. And hopefully for a Baker Mayfield that maybe is a little bit more of a streaky player. I'm not saying he's wildly inconsistent, but he has his hot stretches and his colder stretches. I think they're hoping let's get to January with him on one of those heaters, and if that happens, yeah, they're going to be in a good position to compete for a Super Bowl as early as this season. So again, 11th ranking quarterback in the league, in the top third here for Tampa. Very impressive marks. And then the backup room, it's crowded. You've got Kyle Trask, who's been here the last year of that rookie deal, a second-round pick. Obviously hasn't returned dividends on that selection. We haven't even seen that much Kyle Trask. I'm not a huge believer. I've always viewed him as kind of a Nick Foles-esque backup who's going to take his chances. Has a solid arm in terms of throwing with touch and throwing catchable balls and pushing the ball downfield. But, pretty limited traits overall. Always thought he was drafted a good bit early. But I do imagine he's going to be the backup. We'll see if Teddy ends up winning that job. I like Teddy Bridgewater, but he's pretty capped in terms of physical tools, especially with arm talent, but up in age. He's endured some injuries. We haven't even seen that much of Teddy Bridgewater, but, a little bit less mobile than he was once in his day. He used to be a very good athlete and playmaker out of structure. Not necessarily expecting that if he were to get on the field, but pretty standard NFL backups there. And then got to at least mention Michael Pratt. Liked him coming out. Thought he had shades of Baker Mayfield as a prospect. He's on the PUP list right now. I don't necessarily know what he's going through, but I would love to see him eventually settle in as the backup maybe next season, with Trask and Teddy probably not going to be long for this roster after this year. But let's go ahead and move forward to who Baker is going to be throwing the football to this year, as we take a look at their offseason changes with wide receiver and tight end. At wide receiver, really no losses. There are some injured guys in that room for now, but with Godwin and McMillan, they're hoping they can get back out there sooner rather than later. And then they add through the draft. Obviously, Emeka Egbuka, big first-round selection inside the top 20 there. And then even Tez Johnson in the 7th round, a fascinating pickup. So upgraded at wide receiver. And then neutral at tight end, no change there. So I have the Bucs ranked very kindly in weaponry, ranking 6th to 7th with an A- grade. And this obviously starts with Mike Evans, who just turned 32 years old here on August 21st, but has really been an ageless wonder. And it's not a big surprise that his game has aged so well, because he's not a player that depends on speed. He depends on winning at the catch point and bullying guys down the field. He's a savvy route runner. His route technique is solid in terms of footwork, but something we don't talk enough about with route running is using push-offs and playing physical at the top of your break. Mike Evans is the definition of that. And even if there's DBs like in his area, because he's not this like crazy freaky athlete, especially in terms of, change of direction and agility. I think he's underrated in terms of top speed. But yeah, you can underrate his ability to separate, even if on tape there's a guy like right in his hip pocket. He's separating at the right time, right? At the top of his route, when the ball's arriving, he's pushing off, he's creating enough space that at his frame, he can make all these tough catches and be that bully down the field. Like, that is Mike Evans in a nutshell. And then, yeah, you can run a go ball with him. Once he gets some build-up speed, he can stack corners. He's got underrated long speed in that sense. And he's relatively tough after the catch, too. Like, he's got decently quick feet for a big guy, and obviously at 230 pounds, it's a lot to get on the ground. So there's so much he does well as this team's true number one wide receiver. And despite being 32 years old, plenty of reason to believe he can continue to dominate. Eventually, though, father time will come for Mike Evans. Not expecting that to be this year, but it is possible. And I think that's a big reason why this team drafted Emeka Egbuka here in the first round, kind of looking down the barrel of the gun a little bit with Mike Evans and his age. And just to keep the conversation rolling, let's talk about Egbuka next, though. Once Chris Godwin comes back, I do think Egbuka is third in the pecking order here. But yeah, obviously an exciting pick, the 19th overall pick. I think a surprise to many that the Bucs went wide receiver when they had some pretty big needs at linebacker and edge rusher and corner. Those were your common first round picks for the Bucs. They went those positions in their next few rounds with some other really good players that we get to talk about here today. But yeah, just like about as high of a floor receiver as you can imagine coming out of Ohio State. He's filled out. He looks like a full-grown NFL wide receiver, about 6'1", 205. So he's got some of that, he's not built like Mike Evans, but he's got some of that similar savviness where he understands how to play physical through contact in his routes, how to create separation at the catch point by boxing out receivers for those tough catches over the middle. And that's where I went with, for my pro comp on him, supercharged Jakobi Meyers. For those that watch the Raiders deep dive, that's the defining trait of Jakobi Meyers, really, is running those slants, dig routes, crossing routes, winning that box out leverage on DBs kind of draped over him, and winning those tough catches over the middle of the field that will go down as contested catch wins. And in this offense that's going to run a lot of play action, a lot of crossing routes, and guys working over the middle of the field, Egbuka fits perfectly into that mold. Just consistent hands, and the work that Brian Hartline has done just developing pro-ready receivers out of that Ohio State program. It's just ridiculous, frankly, at this point. The types of pro-ready guys that they're pumping out there. Now, do I see a guy that's like eventually going to replace Mike Evans as this team's kind of number one and best overall wide receiver? That's where I might push back on the very large amount of Emeka Egbuka hype that we're getting right now out of camp and coming out of the draft and stuff. I do still see a guy that isn't the biggest guy, isn't the fastest guy. Realistically, looking down the road, like, you're likely to land in a spot where he is best as a number two, and that's fine to spend the 19th pick on a guy like that. It's just, the way that people are talking about him, and honestly, like, where he's getting drafted in fantasy football right now, like, he's going in the 7th round, for example, 3 rounds ahead of Chris Godwin and ahead of a bunch of other, like, legit number one wide receivers on their teams. Like, it's funny how the hype train can get going. Like, when I originally talked about Emeka Egbuka in my wide receiver rankings in February, people said I was too high on him. And now, after a crazy hype train, I feel like I have to push back on the hype a little bit. I'm not trying to talk down on Egbuka. It's just maybe like, all right, let's not get too carried away here with what he is and what he showed on tape. I still really like him. And in time, I think he's going to be well worth that pick. But, I do think now, as we talk about like Chris Godwin making a return here, and it came out, they're not putting him on the PUP. Like, he is going to be good to go, hopefully within the first 4 weeks of the season. That's why they didn't put him on the PUP. Because if we put him on the PUP, that means it's at least 4 weeks until he's back. So they're getting a relatively optimistic outlook here on his recovery. And that's where, like, I do want to come back to the Emeka Egbuka conversation for just a second, because I do find it one of the more fascinating dialogues out there. Just the amount of hype I've seen on him. Like, again, not to make this all about fantasy football, but I think it's relevant. He's going in the 7th round of your fantasy drafts. Basically, people are expecting him to have this, like, 950 yard season and be, like, just amazing production-wise out the gate. And I don't see the path for that. I just don't. I think you're slightly overrating just how good of a prospect he is. Which, again, not to say he's like anything short of a very good prospect, but like Godwin's coming back, you guys, and there's only so many guys to get the ball here to, and Godwin's gonna exist and take a lot of those targets in the part of the field that Egbuka is going to be, very good at attacking with those crossing routes and the slants and dig routes. Like, Godwin is amazing at that and was amazing at it last year. And Baker's going to trust Godwin in that area. Not that he won't, establish a good connection with Egbuka as well. So, like, look, I do think Chris Godwin is this team's number 2 wide receiver. They did extend him before the season started, before the draft happened. And now, again, not starting on the PUP list. Plenty of reason to believe Godwin can get back out there and be this team's legit number 2 wide receiver. And it's not like there aren't other guys to consume targets here as well, with Cade Otton and Rachaad White and Bucky Irving and even Jalen McMillan if he gets back out there healthy. So of all the, players in fantasy football, at least, that I am lower on, or if you're doing your higher or lower season-long selections on Underdog or even your True Sports betting, like, this might be the guy that I see a market discrepancy on. Not to say anything about like who he was as a prospect or what his future's going to hold for the Bucs, but I don't see it this year. I see a 650 yard, 4 touchdown, maybe 60 reception season for Emeka Egbuka as the kind of wide receiver 3 and target kind of 3.3, if you will, sharing a lot of targets with these other guys. And I just released actually my fantasy rankings on my Patreon. If you guys want to go check that out and support the channel in the process, this analysis shows up there. I don't know that there's a player I'm like lower on in those rankings. I have Emeka Egbuka as the wide receiver 52, whereas right now his average is wide receiver 35. So that's out of the way. I do think that's a fascinating conversation to have about his production on this team this season. But that doesn't mean that it isn't a very good problem for the Bucs to have, and that Egbuka doesn't contribute towards this team ranking as we get back to real football here. Again, they rank inside the top 7 for weaponry for me, inside a league that is flooded with great groups of receivers and tight ends and receiving backs. So it's a good problem to have, this group of 3 that very well might be the best raw, like, wide receiver trio in the league. A very, very good problem for the Bucs to have. And then with those 3 guys kind of in place, you have like really good complementary pieces around them. You have Cade Otton, who's a very capable possession tight end. There was even some moments last year where him making some tough catches and doing some stuff after the catch where I had some Cade Otton moments. Like, I didn't know you were fully capable of that. But ultimately, I think he is like just kind of in that collection of 12 to 14 very solid possession Y tight ends. He's getting better as a blocker, which is very respectable. So he's a very nice piece here as well that should have another solid season. You have 2 receiving backs, really. I mean, Rachaad White, for all of the Bucky Irving breakout last year, Rachaad White is still going to play a ton to keep Bucky, fresh and healthy, to do all the good work he does on earlier downs. But White is one of the better pass blocking backs in the league. I have my qualms with what he does as a runner, but he is excellent as a 3rd down back option for them. They have Jalen McMillan dealing with like a neck injury right now, kind of an interesting situation. Hopefully he can get cleared and get back out there. But, he's a very solid to good young player. If Egbuka wasn't here, he would have a lot of hype in this spot. But now that Egbuka is here, it's going to be really tough for Jalen McMillan to carve out a role. Even as you look into the future, like, okay, if Mike Evans, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but let's just say they win the Super Bowl and Mike Evans retires. I don't think Jalen McMillan is by default their next starting wide receiver, because Igbuka and Godwin's skill sets as kind of intermediate demons is what I would call them. I think both Godwin and Igbuka can step outside, but I don't consider either of them like great vertical threats, or perimeter wide receivers like Mike Evans in that role. Jalen McMillan very much falls into that same category, where he's best running crossers and working over the middle of the field, run after catch. Really, Godwin, Igbuka, and McMillan are all kind of roughly in the same build of what they're good at the wide receiver position, just to differing degrees. McMillan to me, like, kind of a fascinating fit at this point. I would open up the phone with McMillan too if he gets back out there healthy, because I think he could probably help out someone else, and you could get a pretty decent return for him as a 3rd round pick last year. I don't know. That's just my take on it. It's a good problem for the Bucs to have in terms of depth. And I still think he's a guy that can get better. He really had some exciting moments last year and some explosiveness on tape. But a lot of drops and a lot of missed opportunities and contested catch looks. That's what's really held him back. So if he can hit the jugs machine and secure those hands, you are talking about a good starter in the NFL. So for him to be your 4th, that's a very good problem for the Bucs to have. And then Tez Johnson's fascinating. They took a couple of these guys in the draft with Tez and David Walker, where it's like, well, there's really no criticism of their technique, their production, their tape. It's just, does their physical skill set translate to the next level? We'll talk about David Walker later on, but Tez Johnson's the smallest wide receiver, I would think, to ever get drafted. And even then, this is a guy with really good tape that falls to the 7th round because he's 155 pounds. And we have seen, those are the questions on Tank Dell. Tank Dell, unfortunately, has had a hard time staying durable in the NFL, dealing with all these aliens on the field. It's like, he's a great route runner. He's hyper quick. He's really good at the wide receiver position. As long as the ball's in his catch radius, he's going to come down with the football. There's really no major knocks on Tez Johnson. It's just like, does his skill set translate to the NFL level? And taking that in the 7th round, why not? So he's a tough player to rate as we head into the season. I put a 68 rating on him with that yellow arrow, which says like this could actually go way up like early, like he could actually just be good out the gate, or he just might not be able to hang against more physical corners that he's going to see at the NFL level. You have Trey Palmer here. We'll see if he makes the team, but he's probably the best like field stretcher in terms of vertical speed. So I would think they want to keep that skill set around here. And then you're starting to get into a competition here because Godwin's not starting on the PUP list. We'll see if McMillan does, but Sterling Shepard has that chemistry with Baker Mayfield. He's definitely getting up there in age. Ryan Miller played a little bit last year. Raheem Jarrett's shown some flashes, so we'll see if any of those guys make it, but it's a very deep, very capable group of weapons, and saying very capable is probably selling this group short. But in terms of anybody else that we didn't talk about yet, you got some backup tight ends here. Payne Durham, very solid like tight end too, just not really any speed to write home about or athletic twitch, but a very tough blocker and very strong hands, good for big personnel. And then Devin Culp as well, got on the field late last season. I think him in the role that he was projected into coming out of Washington last year as a 7th round pick, that kind of wing tight end role, that Jonnu Smith-esque, maybe Michael Pruitt, that idea of that athletic wing tight end that's not really an inline option, but can get lost on play action, play off the line a little bit more. He's I think, going to make this team in that role. And then Keeft as a tight end 4 as well, as a blocker, is a good piece. So they've got kind of adequate tight end depth for what it's worth. And then the only other back we didn't talk about was Sean Tucker. We'll get into him more with the backfield breakdown in just a second, but going to be pretty limited looks for him in the receiving game, I think, with Bucky and Rashad ahead of him. So this group obviously goes a long way towards the Bucs ranking as high as they do in this series, even if I had a little bit of pump the brakes there on the hype machine of Emeka Egbuka, at least for this season. But yes, let's turn the page to the backfield. And these running backs with a focus on the run game. As far as the offseason changes, nothing. They stay neutral there. They were happy with this group last year, as they should be. But this Bucs backfield certainly starting to climb up the ranks here. They ranked very low last year, regrettably so for me. I am kicking myself on not believing in Bucky Irving to the degree that I could have. Not that I hated him as a prospect, still had him as a mid-round guy, inside the top 10 for my running back rankings and all that, but certainly was scared off by the physical measurables on him more than I should have been. The tape did not lie on him. This dude is damn near impossible to tackle and understands this position extremely well. So here, as Bucky heads into year 2 and with the rest of this backfield, the Bucs now getting a very respectable ranking, as high as 12th for running back in the league. And that is certainly something that can climb as well with that B grade there, with Bucky now heading into year 2 and the rest of these guys as well surrounding him. But yeah, Bucky now the kind of bona fide starter, at least on early downs, for where it really matters for the run game. Again, pass game, you're going to see probably a little bit more Rachaad White still, but yeah, man, what's not to like in what we saw from Bucky Irving? And it really was like, I mean, you think about what I said about with like Tez Johnson. The question on Bucky was, okay, well, the tape's not the problem. It's does his physical traits translate? And when you have those types of players, the beauty of it is you kind of know right away. Because if the physical traits translate, then they translate, and the dude's just a baller. So it kind of makes sense why the Bucs turned around and drafted a couple of those guys this year with Walker and Tez Johnson. But as soon as Bucky started getting touches for this team, as early as week 1, it was like, oh yeah, it's only a matter of time before they have no choice but to just give him the ball instead of Rachaad White, who was the core reason why I was so low on this Bucs backfield last year. I've seen enough Rachaad White to know that he doesn't have the vision and rushing instincts to be a consistent starter in the league as a ball carrier out of the backfield. Bucky's got that. And even though he's only 195 pounds soaking wet and he's not that fast, he has great contact balance. He's stronger than his listed weight would indicate. And just remarkable instincts out in space. He understands the geometry of tackling so well. He anticipates angles from defenders and will set you up so that you're never getting all of him. You end up having to get arm tackles on him because he's got these quick feet paired with that contact balance where he just slips through arm tackles out in space, and just understands how to get low and absorb contact and redistribute it as well. So he's got that beautiful combination of shiftiness and contact balance that leads to him just breaking a million tackles. Honestly, a player that he reminds me a ton of on the field is if you just kind of hit Kareem Hunt with the Honey I Shrunk the Kids machine just a little bit, but it ended up with the same results. That's kind of what I see in Bucky Irving. And obviously Kareem Hunt, like in his prime, was a top 5 or 6 running back in the league, again, on the field. Like I see so much of that in Bucky Irving. Again, as far as his rating goes, an 84 rating coming out of that rookie season for me, I think very, very respectable, with the up arrow on him saying, I expect him to continue to climb and exceed that ranking. Now, if there's anything in the peripherals to say, like, pump the brakes on the Bucky Irving hype, which is, I mean, the train has left the station, right? Like, this dude is getting all of the hype, deservedly so, for what he showed last year. I'm not saying we should necessarily pump the brakes, but he did kind of eat against bad run defenses last year. He had 6 games of 80-plus yards. 2 of those did come against the Panthers, a historically bad run defense last year. 2 of them came against the Saints, including the Week 18 Saints. 1 against the New York Giants and 1 against the Chargers. The good run defenses they faced definitely slowed him down much more. I don't know if that's going to end up mattering or not. I think the tape on him is fantastic and the talent is fantastic. And generally speaking, I'm on the Bucky Irving hype train, but I maybe like jumped on the caboose. Whereas there's some people saying like, no, this guy's going to be like one of the best running backs in the NFL this year. I'm like, okay, maybe. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I expect this to be his backfield on first and second down. And then you got Rachaad White. Like, I feel like I've already kind of talked about this. Like, I just, his vision, his lack of creativity. He ran with some added toughness last year. I'll give him some credit there. He looked as good running the ball last year as I've ever seen him. Maybe with a fire lit under his ass a little bit. Like, dang, I haven't gotten that next contract yet. And this Bucky Irving kid is a much better runner than me. So when he did get the ball, he ran really hard last year. But I still just, I don't think he's got the complete package as a runner. In fact, I think Sean Tucker is much more interesting actually as a factor in the run game. There were times where Sean Tucker touched the ball last year and you're like, that's Jonathan Taylor. His size, the way he's built looks very similar. He's got that same speed train style. And he had some really explosive moments last year. Over 6 yards a touch, 50 carries for 308 yards. So going to be pretty limited opportunities for Tucker unless there's an injury. But as you start to look to 2026, I'm curious, like, how confident are they in Bucky or even Sean Tucker as a pass blocker? Because I think that's the only thing really keeping Rachaad White on this team right now is the reliability on passing downs as kind of like a Samaje Perine role. But if they're ready to let Rachaad White go, Sean Tucker could get an added opportunity and start to, kind of emerge. He went undrafted for reasons outside of his physical talent and tape at Syracuse. But he's got a lot of talent there. And honestly, they might just keep those three because the rest of these guys in this backfield are undrafted types. But yeah, the Bucs are in a really good spot with this backfield. And then I didn't really mention Baker in the design run game. They showed a little bit earlier in the season with him kind of keeping the ball and doing some stuff in the design run game, and it felt like they kind of got away from it. But he can do that. And down by the goal line, read options. He can even do like QB power. Like, he's built like a running back. So he contributes a little bit with that QB run multiplier. It isn't much, but a B- grade there. Does get them inside the top half for how much the QB helps the run game. But let's get to our final position group for the offense. This offensive line, a tremendous group. One that this offseason didn't have to make too many changes because they're keeping all their core starters, but they are losing a couple of nice backups here. Justin School goes to Minnesota, and Robert Hainsey is going to be the starting center for the Jags, following Liam Cohen over there. He didn't have to play last year because that offensive line was one of those rare O-lines that did just stay healthy. But they did lose some depth there with Hainsey for sure. And then they bring in Charlie Heck, who might have to start at tackle here, it looks like, with Tristan Wirfs going down early. And then they did pick up Jake Majors, an undrafted free agent out of Texas that I thought would get drafted. But I said neutral on the O-line, but it is at least worth keeping in the back of your mind, especially because they're already down one to start the season with Wirfs here, that their O-line depth is not what it was last year. And this was a team that had remarkable health along this O-line that statistically is unlikely to repeat. But as far as your starters are concerned, this is an outrageously talented group that I did ding slightly, knowing that Wirfs is going to miss probably the first month of the season, and he is the elite player really on this O-line, but probably the best player on this football team. So even if he's missing just a quarter of the season, that's enough to ding their ratings a little bit, but still gets them with the 6th overall offensive line ranking for the season, 2nd for pass blocking, and then 14th overall for run blocking. But obviously a very good unit. Let's start with Wirfs in that left tackle spot. I mean, just continues to get better. He slides over to the left side. He's been an absolute rock. I think he has probably emerged as the premium elite pass blocking tackle in the league. Lane Johnson and Laramie Tunsil are still in that discussion, but I think my pick is Wirfs. If there's a good argument against that, it's that he gets to play in the NFC South against just the most egregious, pitiful pass rushes you could imagine. Like the units that Carolina, New Orleans, and Atlanta were trotting out last year, getting 6 games against those guys, that's going to help your pass blocking efficiency rates. But outside of that, you can't go through this dude. He's got enough range in his kick sets. He's got enough athleticism. He's got the technique. He's got everything you look for. He's probably slightly overrated as a run blocker. His run blocking tape just isn't as immensely dominant as you might expect to find with a guy like this. It's still very good. He's super strong. He's super smart. He tested, like, for example, he tested super well in his combine coming out of Iowa. And it's obviously showed up as a pass blocker. I just don't know that he's fully tapped into all of his athleticism in the run game. Again, still like an 82 run block rating. He's an excellent player there, but he's not as elite as a run blocker as he is as a pass blocker. But obviously, as soon as he gets back out there, they can leave him on an island and have one of the best offensive linemen in the league, hands down. Now, they're going to be without him for 2 to 5 weeks is kind of the rough estimate there. We'll see what this ends up looking like. That's a bit of a wild card for this team, is just how many games are they missing with Tristan Wirfs, and how much does that end up mattering, right? You've got a big road division game, Atlanta, week 1. You've got a couple of excellent pass rushes in Houston and Philadelphia within the first couple of weeks. Even the Jets have some annoying pass rushers to deal with there. So, like, that's a big thing in terms of, competing for seeding. And if some of these wild cards in this division, like Carolina and Atlanta, really figure it out, if things get tight down the stretch, those early games, this team might not be at their best without their best player in Tristan Wirfs. But once he gets out there, you are locked and loaded, ready to go. Charlie Heck, on the other hand, is kind of where I was going with this. Not trustworthy as a tackle. They're going to have to really do a good job giving him chip help and working around that as long as he's out there. And Michael Jordan, I guess going by Mike Jordan now, doesn't want to be attached to the Michael Jordan namesake. He's actually listed as a backup tackle for Tampa. That's interesting. He has played mostly guard. I think he played tackle at least a little bit at Ohio State. But yeah, you don't want him out there either. Their tackle depth is frankly some of the worst in the league, and this is the team, other than technically the Chargers, that has been forced into their tackle depth sooner rather than later. And Tampa doesn't have a Trey Pipkins to plug in there as a starter like that. They are going straight to poor depth, so it's a concern out the gate. But to go through the rest of this group, we got Ben Bredeson at left guard. He, heading into last season, was kind of like, really? They're going to start Ben Bredeson? It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see how it plays out for him. And they were hoping for him to just, not be horrible as their weakest link, and that's exactly what happened. He was solid. He was aight. Definitely took his losses when he could isolate him one-on-one, but going to get a lot of double-team help as that guard there. And was, smart and adequate-ish in the run game. Not this freak of nature, not the most consistent guy. He's going to fall off blocks. He's going to, again, lose in pass protection. But he settled in as an okay player, got a decent contract extension for what he is, and they will continue to operate with him as their weakest link here because the rest of this group is very good. Graham Barton at center, heading into year 2. The arrow is absolutely pointing up on him. I feel like he took his lumps right away. He was moving all the way inside to center as a tackle and took his losses early on, but I think got better as the season went on. Very balanced, super smart, athletic, first-round pick from last year. I fully expect Graham Barton within the next 2 years to start to get into the kind of top 5 to 8 center conversation. He's just got to keep climbing, and how quickly can that arrive for him? Is that this year? Is that next year? Is it 2027? We'll see, but you're very confident in at least the floor from him right now, and you love the ceiling. And then at right guard, you got Cody Mock. He's been on that upward trajectory as well. Really struggled as a rookie, was awesome last year. Was just a good overall player last year. And if he takes another step, him and Graham Barton could be one of the better center guard combinations next to each other in the league if they continue to go on a kind of skyrocket trajectory. We'll see where Mock kind of lands there. But the floor, again, is very nice now with what he showed last year. And if he continues to bulk up and eliminate mistakes, he as well could get into the kind of top 10 guard conversation. There's really not a lack of physical tools for him that would keep him out of that discourse. It's just he had limited play strength coming into the league and coming from that lower level of competition. It's been a bit of an adjustment. So it's just kind of, we're figuring out where he's going to land, where he's going to settle in terms of his developmental upside. And then Luke Gedeke as well, who I think is another one of these guys, smaller school, limited play strength coming in, struggled early, but has developed so well here. And I think he more so has settled in as one of these just really good tackles. He's got shorter arms. He's not the strongest overall player, and his body is probably, maxed out for the most part. But that pairs with really athletic, really good athletic ability, excellent technique, excellent toughness, and he has been just rock solid at right tackle. He hasn't been paid yet. I think his is coming. We've seen some of these right tackle contracts fly off the board, if you will. Zach Tom got about $23 million. We just saw in this division, Taylor Moton got $22 million. I wouldn't be surprised if we get that news here within the next 2 weeks or so before the season starts. Luke Gedeke getting taken care of about, probably close to 5 years, $110 million, something like that. So you can obviously see that the starting five, when healthy, is about as good as it gets, especially from a pass blocking perspective. And then if Barton and Mock continue to trend upwards and become bona fide studs as run blockers, which I'm not quite prepared to say that they are, as we kind of rank these players at their floor and what they've proven to this point in time. If they can prove to be studs, which is very much in their potential, this could be an excellent group of run blockers as well when you put the whole unit together. And then, you are absolutely talking about a top 2, top 3 offensive line in the league. Whereas, again, right now they rank 6th, factoring in a little bit of the injury on Tristan Wirfs. They would be 5th, by the way, without that kind of injury denotion, if you will. They rank pretty tightly with our 5th offensive line, which hasn't been revealed quite yet. But as far as the rest of the depth, we already mentioned their tackle depth is pretty concerning. The interior depth is extremely unproven as well. There's reasons to believe in Elijah Klein and Jake Majors as backups, but they haven't, proven anything in the league, obviously, at this point in time. Klein was an interesting 6th-round pick last year, very strong guy out of UTEP. So he would be your backup guard if you had an injury, and then Jake Majors, I would imagine, is going to be their backup center. Pretty high floor pass blocking type coming out of Texas. I think there's reason to believe, he could establish a career as a solid backup center. Not a great athlete moving forward as a run blocker, so you're probably never going to be super happy with Jake Majors, but at least in terms of someone that if he has to step in as a backup and you don't have to worry about your quarterback getting killed or someone busting protections or anything like that, I think Majors was a very smart pickup for this team there. So those are your 2 interior guys. And then Sua Opeta as well. We'll see if he makes this team, but he's at least played unlike a Klein or Majors. So, at least a little bit more what you're getting there. But it's not necessarily pretty, just kind of a clunky athlete. Commendable that as an undrafted out of Weber State, he ended up, getting some playing time as a backup for the Eagles, but he's taken his pressures, hasn't been a great run blocker, that type of stuff. So, those are probably your 9 guys with Heck, and I would imagine Mike Jordan makes this team. And then you probably got 1 spot open for the rest of those kind of undrafted types to make it. So, yeah, I would say as far as offensive line depth goes, this is actually some of the worst offensive line depth that we've discussed in this series. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind if injuries start to stack up for this Bucs team. Could be an issue, which, to be fair, you'd say that about pretty much every offensive line in the league, but maybe even more so with Tampa. So that rounds out our Bucs offense here. So they come out as the 11th overall offense, 8th in passing game, 17th in run game. Just a super balanced, good unit, with room to even improve there, especially if the coaching rankings, which are really the lowest of the splits there between all of the position groups in the coaching, if the new offensive coordinator in Grizzard can just kind of pick up where things left off and they get good coaching again, that alone would probably change this to be a top 10 offense. And then you got some added upside there with, Bucky Irving's kind of rating climbing, the interior offensive line kind of climbing, Emeka Egbuka as well, coming in with kind of a rookie rating there. So there's room for this to go up and for this to be a top 6, 7 offense, certainly, which is exciting. But let's talk about this defense that, again, had some struggles last year on and off. A group that I think can be better this year. But let's pick this side of the ball apart and see where those opportunities to get better do exist. So we'll start with the defensive line and look at their offseason changes there. So on the interior of the D-line, very little change there. William Golston not currently back with this team. It feels like he's maybe he did retire. I don't know. It's been hard to keep track of how long he wants to keep playing, but feels like he's been kind of a mercenary available for a late offseason addition at any given time. But he only played 17% of their snaps last year. And then they did draft Elijah Roberts in the 5th round out of SMU. But I said neutral on the interior of the D-line. And then on the edge, definitely some change here. They say goodbye to Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, a first-round disappointment for them, certainly. But they did sign Hassan Reddick, who's coming off a disaster season with the New York Jets that felt like it never really got off the runway, if you will. I think optimistic that they're going to get a bounce back year from Hassan Reddick there. We'll discuss him and just how much they might get from him. But I do see that as a pretty nice addition. And then this is where the tiers start to drop. David Walker, I would say, like, honestly, not even really a competition. The biggest steal in the draft for me, getting him in the 4th round. I thought he was a potential impact rookie pass rusher coming out of Central Arkansas. Just devastating. He goes down for the season, torn ACL, and all the reports too were like he was crushing it in camp. So I'm just gutted. Hopefully he can make a full recovery and we can have some hype for him next year. But it was a quasi loss there, I guess. But I did still say the edge group was upgraded. You were effectively getting nothing from Joe Tryon, and as we'll see here, I think Hassan Reddick is in a good spot here to make an impact. But as we start to rank and break down this defensive line, this is one of the other wild card units for the Tampa Bay Bucs. Reminds me a little bit of what we said with like Green Bay, where it's all there for them to get a really good season out of this unit. But a lot of the pieces, you don't necessarily know where they're going to land in terms of production this season. But they do rank higher than those Packers. They come in as my 8th overall defensive line. A big part of that is the D-line run defense here is spectacular. You've got Vita Vea there alone, amongst some other contributors, but they rank as my 4th overall D-line run defense, and they do come in that same tier that those Green Bay Packers did, a B grade ranking 11th to 17th. But let's get into it and start with the edge group here. So I will start actually with Yaya Diaby, who had an excellent kind of breakout season last year. Actually ended up last year 7th in pressures with 70 pressures, despite only getting 6 sacks there. And a pass rush win rate as well per PFF of 24.4%, which was good for 6th in the NFL among edge rushers. So like the numbers on him were really, really good. Though my rating on him probably not fully reflective of that, is 79 rating as like a good number 2 rusher. I do have the up arrow on him. I don't know. I went and watched all of his pressures because we can do that now thanks to NFL Pro. It only takes 8 minutes to get through his whole season of pressures. It's amazing what we've got at our disposal these days. But having gone through all of his charted pressures this year, I'm just gonna say I'm a little more 1 foot in, 1 foot out on the idea that he's gonna be more than this. I do give him the benefit of the doubt. I put the up arrow on him. He's still relatively new to rushing off the edge. Crazy athlete, gets drafted in the 3rd round because of the athletic twitch, but Louisville, for some godforsaken reason, used him as like a defensive tackle. Like, it was just ridiculous. So there's definitely room for him to add more. But with where he's at right now, did the tape reflect that of the 8th best edge rusher in the league, like his numbers said with the pressures and the pass rush win rate last year? I did not see that when I went through it. I saw definitely his handful of power rushes. It's great to know he's got a bull rush in there. I want to see more of that. And he does have a nice Euro step that can fool offensive tackles for sure, because he's got really good agility and burst. But a lot of his production was on these blitzes and the loops, and that's good. That's something that is a feather in his cap, right? In a stunt blitz heavy system, they lean into his athleticism, very similar to like how we praised Byron Young, the edge rusher for the Rams. Now, I would argue Byron Young is like all stunt and scheme production, tapping into his athleticism. Yaya has that, plus some power, plus some finesse. I'm not making a perfect comparison there, and I don't want to take away everything from Yaya Diaby, but the numbers were certainly helped by his scheme usage. So it's just, that is what it is. And there were also a lot of those pressures where he's speed rushing off the edge. He's not really winning his rep. The tackle's flushing him out, but the quarterback either decides to bail out of a clean pocket or they're getting interior pressure here. And the guy's just walking into Yaya Diaby and he's registering a pressure that way. So I'm kind of, trying to split the difference here and like tell you what I saw on film, but say, yeah, there's definitely still upside here. And that's part of that wild card equation, right? Yaya took a big step from year 1 to year 2. He's now heading into basically his third year of playing edge rusher at a competitive level. So definitely room for him to more consistently hit the bull rush, add more to his finesse skill set. Really all I saw in terms of finesse moves was that Euro step where he's either faking in and then running out, or faking out and running in, or just, those kind of speed rush around the outside. So I'd love to see better, swipes and spin moves and different stuff that he could bring to the table here. And maybe Hassan Reddick can help him with that too, as a guy that also kind of went through a process of learning the art of rushing the passer earlier in his career as someone that played linebacker earlier in his career. So good mentor there, I think. So we'll see what Yaya can give them. I think he is a productive 3-down player that if he just is what he was last year, that's totally fine. But, anytime you start to see a guy put up those numbers and, fans can start to attach to the idea that maybe he is like a top 10 edge rusher. I haven't necessarily seen that out there, but he's not there yet, in my opinion, is what I'm saying. Right now, he's a good number 2 player. But then you do bring in Hassan Reddick, and his range of outcomes is very wide. He turns 31 years old this year. He is coming off a really down year relative to his last 3 or 4 years with the Jets. But he is a guy that is his ability to win is very predicated on his burst and first step. So if he's losing some of that, you could see a quicker fall off for a Hassan Reddick than you do from some other aging edge rushers. So he is just the absolute wild card. He was a 1-year, $14 million contract for a reason. He could be closer to a nothing burger for this Bucs team, or he could be their best pass rusher. So very wide range of outcomes, but yeah, you go back to 2022, especially he was one of the most productive pass rushers in the league. He was still very good in 2023. Someone with outrageous speed and bend, and actually able to convert speed to power as well. Even if he's only listed at 238 pounds or whatever it is, he's able to generate that momentum and get up and under your pads and drive you backwards a little bit too. So he's got a lot in his bag when he's in his prime. We just don't know if he's in his prime anymore. So there's that. And then he's not much of a run defender. He's not horrible. Like, he played a lot of linebacker. He understands how to kind of get off blocks and that kind of thing. He's not great at it, but there's a baseline of run defense where he's at least like, he can be on the field if you want him to be on earlier downs, especially in a 3-4 system where he's able to kind of, stand up and use his athleticism to work around guys, which is what he's going to be in here. And he's going to be a weapon as a coverage dropper here too, in a way that he maybe wasn't in his last 2 stops. So I like the fit schematically speaking, and I'm optimistic that he can still have some in the tank and even be this team's pass rusher. He gets the highest pass rush rating, in fact, here, but no guarantee that that's who he is. And then your edge depth is pretty good. You got Anthony Nelson, who's just kind of the definition of an edge 3, does a lot of dirty work on early downs. He's actually taken a step back in terms of run stops and whatever weight you want to put in PFF. Run defense grade, he's kind of declined year after year here. So take that for what it is, but still someone I'm expecting to be a good complement to Hassan Reddick, to play some of that early down work. And he's been able to rack up some pressures and get involved as an early down rusher as well. So he's a nice edge 3 piece who will rotate with Hassan Reddick, especially keep him fresh, keep him healthy. And then Chris Braswell in year 2, a good pass rushing prospect out of Alabama. A little bit stiff, not the most explosive guy, but he's got a bull rush. He's got some different swipes and ways that he wins. And he was able to, showcase some of that in a limited opportunity last year. So especially with David Walker getting hurt, there is added opportunity and pressure on Chris Braswell to potentially make an impact here. They don't need him to do that necessarily, but if Reddick can't really be what they're hoping he can, then you would really want Chris Braswell to step up. Someone that has the potential to be like a quality number 2 rusher as earlier as this year. He's just unproven. And those are your core 4. Jose Ramirez was drafted a couple years ago. He's played slightly here, but not expecting much there. And then, David Walker. This is a 2025 Bucs season preview, and he can't play this year. But just if you want some optimism for 2026 and beyond, I would recommend go back to my edge rush rankings video. Go check out Sam Monson and Steve Palazzolo put together a really cool draft community collab video, and they invited me to partake in that. And they asked all of us draft analysts, who's your favorite player in this draft? Regardless of draft position, David Walker was my answer in that video. So that's really how high I was on him, just devastating. But hopefully can make a recovery and be an impact in the future. But then you got your interior D-line. Vita Vea, obviously the best overall player on this D-line, especially from a run defense standpoint. He is a black hole for the run defense. He eats up double teams. He splits double teams. He can even do some of those slides and stunts up front on earlier downs where they'll ask your nose tackle to line up maybe on one side of the center and slash into the other A gap. He's got enough quickness to do that and kind of cause some disruption as well and some confusion on top of just being a physical force. But he gets off blocks basically at will. If it's a one-on-one situation, he's got just dominant play strength to shed blocks and attack you in the hole. And then it's also the force multiplying effect. It's not just the impact he himself makes, it's what he opens up for everybody else. And he allows you to take a Kalijah Cansey at 280 pounds and start along your interior D-line because of the attention Vita Vea commands. So he is very much an elite graded run defending nose tackle, which is just a rarity. There's only a handful of these guys in the league, 4 or 5 of them that can even be asked to do all this stuff that Vita Vea does, let alone be an awesome impact in terms of doing that consistently. So, the value that he brings that so many other teams can't do what the Bucs are able to do with Vita Vea, that is almost transcends Vita Vea's own player rating. But he's a good pass rusher too. He's got power. You just wish he was a little bit more consistent at it. He just kind of disappears at times, and I don't have a great explanation for it. But when he wants to win as a rusher, he's pretty damn good at it, asserting his force as the player that he is. So he's the best overall player on this D-line. Very happy to have him, even though he's getting up there in age a little bit. Turns 31 at the end of the season, but I think he's definitely still got a few good years in his prime left. And then, you have Kalijah Cansey, who's the complete opposite of Vita Vea, a 280-pound athlete playing defensive tackle. Had a down year last year because of a lower body injury, but hopefully can get back healthy and get back on that high-end trajectory. Just a ton of Ed Oliver in his game, who's a stud for the Buffalo Bills, kind of a $20+ million a year type of defensive tackle. Probably not someone in Ed Oliver that you want to be your best defensive lineman, but as a number 2. That's the total trajectory Kalijah Cansey is on in terms of player comp, role, quality of play. It's just last year got derailed. So got to get back to it this year before he earns that big money and you're happy with him as a number 2, but a lot of reason to believe he can. Has a large variety of pass rush moves. He can actually win with power as well, which you might not always think about for a 280-pound defensive tackle, but because of his get-off and his ability to get up and under you and drive you backwards, it's absolutely there. Unfortunately, he's just not that good of a run defender. He's a gap shooter in this system, and they're fine with that, right? That's how they scheme this thing up. But you will see plays where teams are running duo and Kalijah Cansey is a 3 technique, has to face a combo block, and it's ball game. It's game over if you can isolate him in those types of situations, which I don't care how good of a schemer you are, eventually you're going to find yourself in those spots. So he has his drawbacks, but you're really hoping that the flashes he showed, especially in the second half of his rookie season, can really be a more consistent staple of his game, and he can be an impact for this pass rush. So you can really see that if Yaya and Cansey get even better, if Reddick can get back to some version of himself, you can really see how this can be, maybe the best defensive line the Bucs have had in the Todd Bowles era. I mean, at least going back to since they won their Super Bowl, having the best D-line since then, because those were obviously some really good D-lines as well. As far as D-line depth and rotation, Logan Hall is still going to rotate as a quasi-starter for this team as the other kind of 4-eye/3 technique when they do want to run any sort of odd front. So if it's a base 3-4 or a 5-1 penny front, whatever they're going to do, a 4-3 over front, whatever that look might be, Logan Hall will be that other kind of athletic interior defensive end hybrid player. And inside that role, he's adequate. I think they overdrafted him to do that, but he's been okay. He's developed a little bit. You could argue the up arrow should be there on him, but I think this is kind of what he is, as just a okay rotational hybrid end with some athleticism and versatility. And then you got Greg Gaines, who's just a really nice backup defensive tackle to have, run defense oriented guy who can basically just, every other drive, if you want to, on earlier downs, take Cansey off the field and have Gaines play 3 technique, he can do that. And then if you want to give Vita Vea a breather, Greg Gaines can play a little bit of nose and do that as well. So he's a really good backup. He frankly contributes as well to this D-line run defense ranking inside the top 5 as it does. And then after that, you got Elijah Roberts, who I think is being drafted to be groomed here for them to let Logan Hall walk. That would be my vision for this type of player. He is an athletic hybrid end that doesn't really know what he's doing right now, but hopefully with the right coaching, he can develop into what Logan Hall is today. CJ Brewer played a little bit last year, but not well. So we'll see who else makes the team on the interior. They got 6 other guys right now. They're going to have to get busy with their cuts here, but probably just room for one guy after those top 5 names there. Maybe they keep 7, depending how much they like those guys. But yeah, there's your D-line. It's a very good group that has a chance to, frankly, be a great group if they hit some great green lights there. But let's go to the linebackers. And definitely some change here in terms of the guys that they'll be rolling with. So KJ Britt has had to be kind of a rotational starter for them over the last couple of years. And then JJ Russell as well has been an adequate backup, but nothing too crazy with those losses. They're excited to get Servasia Dennis back. He missed most of last season. He's poised to be a starter for them, only played 9% of snaps. And then they did sign Anthony Walker as an insurance depth piece as well. So I said slightly upgraded at linebacker. But as we break this group down, it has a chance to be fully upgraded, just depending on how much of an impact Servasia Dennis can make here in his 3rd season as a starter. But let's start with Levante David. And frankly, you pair what we said about Dennis and not knowing just how good he's going to be, and the fact that Levante David is 35 going on 36 and showing signs of regression the last few years, and that does make this linebacking room a wild card for this Bucs team. This could be a strength for this team, honestly. If David doesn't regress too much further and Dennis is really good, but it could actually be more of a weakness as well. If David continues to regress and Dennis doesn't hit, you're going to have some question marks here. And look, I love Levante David as much as the next guy. I think the idea that he is a Hall of Famer has become much more popular, and I'm on board. I think Levante David should be a Hall of Famer, and the fact that he has given them the caliber of play that he did at age 33, 34 was a huge contributor. Contributed to a Super Bowl winning defense as well at age 32. And the fact that he just keeps signing here for cheap when I think there are other teams that would have given him more money. He wants to retire a buck. yes, he gets my Hall of Fame vote, absolutely. But I think you also got to recognize that he is regressing. He's not like the true ageless wonder. There's aspects of that, the fact that he's still playing at a high level at 35 years old, but it's not like that isn't impacting him. Last year, this defense really struggled to protect the middle of the field. We have seen his ability in coverage drop off. He just isn't moving quite as well as he used to. Last year, he allowed a career high in yards allowed. He also was the highest in yards per reception since 2019, and the highest reception percentage allowed that he's had since 2018. And then if you want to put any stock in the PFF coverage grade, that was also the lowest of his entire career, which goes back to 2012. PFF coverage grade of 56.9. So I think the writing is on the wall here. Like, he's slowing down a little bit. And by a run defense perspective as well, I forgot to mention his missed tackle rate doubled last season. The last 3 years, from 2021 to 2023, he only missed about 7.5% of his tackles consistently throughout those 3 seasons. That jumped to 15.5 last year, which is a concerning level. So if he's starting to lose a half a step, he's not quite in the same position to make all these tackles that he once would have been. That can change his technique. So maybe he makes some adjustments there and cleans some of that up. Maybe that continues. So again, the writing's on the wall. He's regressing. He's still a good overall player. He has an elite mind. You know, like him and Bobby Wagner, like, there just aren't guys that can process the run and get into position mentally in the way that these guys can. He's still savvy to get off blocks. He still plays super physical. He again, is still a good player, but he has regressed in each of his last couple seasons. And if that, hits him even harder this year, Father Time's going to come for everybody eventually, and it's knocking at the door for Levante David. So, it just depends kind of how hard that fall off is, but still a very good player right now. Not quite the all-pro Hall of Fame talent that he was in his prime just a few years ago. And then you got Servasia Dennis, who was one of my guys in that draft. Absolutely stood out as a, kind of mid-round potential starter as a linebacker. And he's had a couple years to develop here, but gets hurt last year after winning that starting job. It's just, he's got to go out and prove it. There's no other way to put it. But I liked the balance of his game coming out of Pittsburgh, and you kind of got to go back to him as a prospect, frankly, because he's only started a couple games. There's not enough sample size to really take away who he's been in the pros, but you kind of project that skill set forward here into year 3 from what he was as a prospect, and like super physical tackler, understood the run game, understood how to get off blocks. I thought he had good coverage feel, really instinctive player out in space, secure tackler. Like, there's just so much to like in his game. And the fact that he's kind of won this job without playing too much, I think, says a lot. So I'm optimistic. He is even kind of a breakout candidate here in his 3rd season, league-wide, not just for this Bucs team. So I'm very excited. I hope he can stay healthy. I just can't give him too favorable of a rating, given that he's hardly played. I think I'm maybe even a little bit biased to give him a 70 overall rating here, considering I liked him so much coming out. But you pair those two things together, and the Bucs come out smack dab in the middle of the league, really. They rank 17th overall for linebacker. For coverage, they rank 19th to 21st, a little bit lower there. And then for run defense, they rank 15th to 16th. So it is a wild card unit. It's tough to rank. This could be a top 10 unit. Like I said, if David's just fine and Dennis is really good, or this could be bottom 5, bottom 6. Now, they do have a little bit of insurance there if Dennis really struggles or if they have an injury here. Anthony Walker Jr. is a perfectly reasonable player at the linebacker position. Checks a lot of boxes, has just never been overly consistent or emerged and like held onto a starting job, but he's athletic, he can hit, he can play the run. Fine enough, kind of adequate starter if they do have to go to him. And then they do have Deion Jones as well. He's a good coverage player still to this day as he's getting up there in age, but just really hard to watch run defense tape. So you really only want Deion Jones out there if it's a passing down. He's an option for them. I'll just say that. But yeah, there's your linebacker group. A little bit more TBD on what they can get from that group. But let's turn our eyes to this secondary and take a look at their offseason changes here. At cornerback, really no losses there, and then they spend a pair of day 2 picks on Benjamin Morrison and Jacob Parrish. They also signed Kendall Vilder, who may or may not make this team, but definitely upgraded for me with those draft picks at cornerback. And then at safety, a little bit harder to say if this should be like downgraded, neutral, or upgraded. I just left it as neutral. But Jordan Whitehead, who did come back and played last year, he was okay-ish. Better in run defense than coverage for sure. Mike Edwards as well came back. He played 21% of their snaps. But their answer there to those losses, instead of adding someone necessarily, they're actually going to take Tyke Smith and play him at safety. So you could argue that they upgraded there. I really like Tyke Smith, but at least from a roster standpoint, I'm just going to keep it as neutral. But regardless, they should be in a better spot with this secondary than they were last year, where they already had some question marks, but they definitely didn't have the depth to survive some of the injuries that they did. This year, they're locked and loaded with much better depth, especially at corner. But this is a really good secondary, man, with ranking 5th to 10th for me with a B+ grade as we head into the season, but they have upside to be top 3 for sure, and one of the best secondaries in the league. And what's also great about this team is they come inside that top tier for DB run support as well. These guys get after it in the run game, and they're definitely contributors to the Bucs being as consistent against the run as they are. But let's go through the cornerback room first. So you've got Jamel Dean as your number 1 corner, at least for one more year. We'll see how this plays out. He does have one more year left on his contract after this year. But I know there's been some discourse in Bucs land about, if they were even going to keep him this offseason. I'm certainly glad they did as they kind of sort through all of this. But Zion McCollum is heading into a contract year. Absolutely heading in the right direction. They draft Benjamin Morrison. Like, the writing's kind of on the wall that this might be Jamel Dean's last year. But man, it's good to have him in there. He's one of the just strongest, most physical corners in the league. And the fact that he is that plus has 4.3 speed, it's a really nice combination. He can kind of do everything they want with him. He can go press man. He can go off zone. You can put him in the slot if you need to. He can play outside. Super versatile, true number 1 corner in my opinion, as long as he's healthy. So it's a great starting point. And then you have Zion McCollum. McCollum to me was looking like one of the true breakout star players of last season. And then the second half of the season hit and he was much more inconsistent. Still had some good games in there, but was way better in the first half of the year than he was in the second half. So hopefully now they can get the full season of breakout Zion McCollum. And, if that happens, they're going to give him a large chunk of money. He has just built in a lab physical traits, 6'2", 200 pounds, crazy speed, but not just that. The way he can move in space, it's very rare. And that started to really, come through for them. Again, mostly in the first half of the year. So the arrow to me is pointing up on him. He's gotten better and more playing time every single year. So no reason to believe now for a guy that did have a transition to make coming out of Sam Houston State, adjusting to the NFL level. It all adds up that it's taken him some time to get to even the level he's at now. But with the contract year and the opportunity he's going to have here with these traits, he still has to go out and prove it. But dude, McCollum could, he could come out and have an all-pro season. That's the type of physical upside he has. His physical comparison, just the athlete, is something like Christian Gonzalez, Derek Stingley. That's the type of athlete this guy is. So we'll see if he can put it all together. If he does, obviously, like we mentioned, there's upside for this defense, this secondary to be a top 3 unit. Yeah, that would help. Zion McCollum is just an all-pro corner this year. But it's not just him that has upside. They are going to go actually with the later corner that they drafted for their slot corner role. And don't freak out. That doesn't mean that Benjamin Morrison is worse than Jacob Parrish. It's just they like Dean and McCollum best on the outside. And Jacob Parrish is definitely more of a slot corner than Benjamin Morrison. So this is not some indictment on Morrison's upside or future with this team. We'll get to him, but very cool to see Parrish get this opportunity. And this makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, he played a lot outside, but I thought his skill set projected very well to the inside. He's a little bit shorter, which so often we see these 5'10" corners get typecasted as inside corners. And that's kind of changed a little bit more, where we want to see these defenses get stronger and more physical slot corners, whereas, the height profile on the outside maybe isn't as important as was once considered. But with Parrish, he's not really moving inside because he's 5'10". He's moving inside because he loves to tackle. He can get off blocks. He's frisky as all hell, and he's strong. And he played a ton of really physical press man, scrappy coverage at Kansas State. I really like this fit. I'm excited to see him. 3rd round pick. He's got to come out and prove it, of course. But I'm optimistic for him within this role. So yeah, dude, if Parrish and McCollum hit, whew, this secondary is cooking with gas. And then you got depth, right? You got Christian Izien, who can play in the slot if need be. He's kind of their chess piece. We could have listed him with the safeties or the slot corners. He's not the best coverage player, but they like his IQ and his friskiness. And then Benjamin Morrison gets to just kind of sit here, learn from a couple of good outside corners, and let that hip recover, right? That's why he falls to the 2nd round. If he never hurt his hip in what was a pretty scary injury, he goes in the 1st round for sure, and might have been the first cornerback drafted in this class. And what's kind of scary about the hip injury is before it happened, you would say Morrison on his tape, his defining strength is the fluidity in his hips, the way he can turn and run and transition out in space. It's special. And for a zone match style defense like this, where they kind of, they'll play press man coverage, and I think Morrison can do that. But they also like to play these guys off, kind of pick you up at about 5 yards and then turn and run, and convert these zones into man coverage pretty quickly. That's the definition of Ben Morrison's strength. So you want to see him get that hip back healthy before he kind of, I think that's kind of the plan, right? Is to let Dean go, pay McCollum, and then have Morrison emerge as the starter outside next year. But you got to see that hip fully recover and him to, show what he can do in practice and maybe even playing a little bit here. Corners get hurt. Dean especially misses a few games every year. So hopefully you can at least get some signs of what he can do and move forward with that. But as a backup as well, that's a hell of a backup to have there. Josh Hayes, also out of Kansas State last year. He played and he played physical. He didn't play consistent in coverage, but I imagine he'll make this team. I would like to think that they like what they see from him on special teams. And then you got Bryce Hall. He's regressed since early in his career when he played very well for the Jets. And then they did sign Kindle Vilder. We'll see if he makes the team. He's been very streaky in coverage at best, but both Vilder and Hall, for whatever it's worth, have played reps in the NFL. So they're pretty damn deep there at corner, if nothing else, with Morrison, Izien, and Hayes has played a little bit. And then at safety, man, this has potential to be one of the best safety duos in the NFL. Now with Tyke Smith sliding back there, it's just a ton of fun, right? My pro comp on Tyke Smith coming out, who was tied with Malik Mustafa in last year's draft class for my number 1 safety. And, Mustafa, I got to take some small victory laps on in flashes, but Tyke Smith was especially a victory lap player for me. He was phenomenal. And in the first half of the year, he was on a defensive rookie of the year trajectory. That obviously became impossible with the year Jared Verse had. But I mean, dude, he was a legit impact in this secondary. He had interceptions. He had forced fumbles. Was a menace playing in the slot, impacting the run. Every bit that young Antoine Winfield Jr. that I praised him for coming out of Georgia. And I'm excited to see him get a full safety opportunity here. He hasn't done a lot of true safety stuff. Now, he'll still do a lot of that slot work. I imagine when they go single high, Antoine will probably be their free safety, but it's not that Tyke can't handle that stuff or that he doesn't have the speed and range on the back end to do that. They're putting a lot on his plate. We'll see how consistent he can be from a coverage standpoint. Last year, he did have some games where he gave up some bigger plays, but I'm just super optimistic that Tyke can emerge as a top 10 to 15 safety in the league, and that he's going to be a rock star in a system that he is every bit the Bucs style. not just Antoine Winfield Jr., but even going back to like when Jordan Whitehead was really good for this defense the first time around. Very, very much in their mold. So love that. And then, by the way, yeah, you got Antoine Winfield Jr., who's a top 3 safety in the NFL and a true true do-it-all superstar for this team. I'll never pass up on the opportunity to rave about Antoine Winfield, but we've been doing this for a couple years now. I mean, the dude's just a bona fide rock star. He did have a little bit more of a down year last year, gave up some bigger plays than he has in his time in Tampa. I think that'll come back to earth. I think there was just a lot of moving parts, and the pass rush wasn't very good. But yeah, man, he's got range as a free safety. He's got instincts to do any of the sort of split safety stuff. So man coverage, match coverage, quarters coverage, he can handle all of that. He's got awesome ball skills, just like his dad did. He's one of the just most batshit crazy physical run defenders in the league at any position. Loves to come up and hit. I don't have a bad word to say about Antoine Winfield Jr. One of my favorite players in the league. And he as well was one of my big my guys. Had him as I think he was the 16th overall player in that draft class for me with a first round grade, definitely inside the top 20. So that rounds out your starters there. And then, yeah, in terms of safety depth, we saw some issues here last year with that kind of intermediate half safety, half slot corner role. Christian Izien just had his struggles in coverage last year, but he would probably be your backup safety, honestly, if one of these guys got hurt. Kayvon Merriweather as well. He's been as advertised coming out of Iowa, just not a lot of speed, but he's a smart player on the back end. So, kind of settling in as a backup safety. Those two guys, I think, are adequate options. And then you got undrafted types, Shiloh. We'll see if he makes the team. His tape was pretty bad at Colorado. Nice kid, though. Ultimately, hopefully they can keep Winfield and Tyke healthy back there, in which case I think anything outside of, there's some good safety duos today. Like Detroit's got the crown for duos for safety rooms, but Baltimore just added Malachi Starks, so that could be tough too. But yeah, Tampa absolutely has potential to be in the top 3 or 4 safety duos in the league here this year. But obviously we get to end on a good note with this awesome secondary that could be even more awesomer if everything can go right here. It's a really fun unit with a ton of upside. So this rounds out the Bucs defense, and at least in terms of looking at the roster and the coaching and what should happen here, theoretically speaking, I have the Bucs getting back on track with a top 10 defense. They rank as our 6th overall defense, which, yes, that's where Minnesota was. Just a quick note, yes, we just had the Vikings with the 6th overall defense in our last deep dive. The Bucs were right behind them, and you can go see some of my comments on it from that Vikings deep dive that I pinned there. But I didn't like the Harrison Phillips trade for them when these defenses were ranking pretty tight. The Bucs did surpass them there, and just a reminder, I will be publishing my final spreadsheet with all of the ratings and everything finalized with cuts and trades and all the changes that it's impossible to keep track of as the series goes on throughout the series. That'll be published for free on my Patreon at the end of the season. But yes, a slight change here with that Vikings Harrison Phillips trade. The Bucs now find themselves 6th for overall defense, 12th in pass defense, and 2nd in overall run defense. Kind of getting back to that top 3 more elite run defense, some improvements to the pass defense as well with the secondary and the D-line and better health. And I think that's a big reason to be optimistic about the Bucs. I think the offense, looking back on it, like it should be pretty similar to what it was last year, which was a really good unit. I think the improvements the defense should be making this year is where the Bucs become a sleeper team and honestly like a legitimate Super Bowl contender this season. Now, let's talk a little bit of special teams before we get into the interview with Trevor. So they did make a change on the special teams. They went through 3 punters last year. They struggled to locate a good punter, and then they go and sign Riley Dixon. So that's another area for improvement is with the punter. And the Bucs special teams is set up to be pretty good. They came out as our 9th overall special teams. They have an excellent kicker. Chase McLaughlin is graded out as the 3rd overall kicker over the last 2 years. It's a good culture, some better depth with DBs and, linebackers should help their coverage unit. as well. And then we mentioned the addition of Riley Dixon at punter, who's been very solid, ranks as the 14th punter averaged out throughout the last couple of years. The main question is going to be who's returning kicks. Sean Tucker, I think, is going to be their kick returner. I like the idea of him as a kick returner, just relatively unproven there. Tez Johnson returning punts maybe could be fun. So they got some interesting names there with potential, but unproven with the returners. But yeah, pretty damn good special teams, again, ranking 9th. But before we do like team summary and look at their schedule and my win total projections on this team, we are going to bring in Trevor Sikkema, lead draft analyst for Pro Football Focus, and obviously co-host of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast as well. It's a really fun interview. I hope you guys enjoy, and then we'll come back and finish up the video. And now I am stoked to welcome back Trevor Sikkema to the Bucs Deep Dive. Trevor, you're kind of completing the home and home circuit here because you guys had me on your channel for the mock draft. We roped Connor in, forced him to talk about the Jets earlier in the series about 2 months ago, and now you, with the Bucs ranking 6th here towards the back end of the series, get to come in and talk some Bucs. So welcome back. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Appreciate you having me back on the channel. Always love getting to talk some ball with you. I'll make sure that I tell Connor that his appearance here on this channel was way long ago when we started this, much further down the power rankings. I'll be sure to let him know that. But buddy, it's always good to link up with you. So I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, Connor definitely needs a reminder that the Jets are a bad football team for sure. Hopefully things will be different here though for Tampa. So I wanted to start off talking about Baker Mayfield. Last year was kind of an interesting, like, big year coming off the bounce back and everything. Now it feels like he's settled back in. He's a franchise quarterback again. But I wanted your take on kind of like how confident you are in him and sort of where you would rank Baker Mayfield heading into the season. So I'm actually going to kind of do one of these read off names and you tell me when to stop. Like,
okay.
So like who you would take.
Okay. All right. I see these on TikTok all the time, and so I feel like I'm ready for it. I feel like I've had practice.
Yeah. It's not going to be like the blind ranking thing. Those can get funny, but yeah. So obviously you got your Elite Four. You're not taking them over those unless you're crazy.
No.
But then we'll go. I'm kind of spoiling my own quarterback rankings reading through these, but
that's okay. It's just a teaser for your future content. That's all right.
Yeah. All right. So Justin Herbert.
I would take Herbert.
Yep. Matthew Stafford, and let's just say healthy Stafford for this season. Yeah, let's just pretend he's healthy.
I'd still take Stafford. He is playing at such a I'll say like a wise level of the quarterback position, and so like this is in no way Baker Mayfield disrespect. I have a lot of respect for Matthew Stafford and how good he is. So I would take Stafford. Yeah.
Okay. CJ Stroud. Pulling at the heartstrings right out the gate here.
I know that one's tough. These guys really are like in the same tier for me. I think I'd take Stroud. I think I would take Stroud. So I'll go Stroud there.
Yep. And then I actually have Jaden Daniels in there too. I'm assuming you're not taking him over Jaden Daniels, or maybe you are.
I would take Jaden Daniels. Yeah. I think Jaden's special, man. I think that Jaden could have a year this upcoming year where we're talking about him as absolutely in that tier 2 of quarterbacks in the NFL. Like his rookie season was that good. And if he does take a next step this year, or even at any point, like
he just has to sustain.
Right. So I would actually take Jaden for everything that he brings.
This is where it gets really hard, and this is right around where I've got him. So Dak Prescott.
I'd take Baker.
Okay, so you're taking him over Dak. What about Jared Goff?
I would take Baker.
Jalen Hurts.
Hurts is so different of a quarterback, and their systems are so tooled to what both of those guys do well.
Starting a team from scratch.
I would take Baker. I think Baker's the more reliable passer. Yeah.
And then I guess the only other one would be like Jordan Love.
boy, they're like the same quarterback, right? I mean, like both of those dudes approach the game the exact same way. I'll be a homer and I'll take Baker coming off the year that he had last year. But I mean, that is the archetype. Like they're the same archetype of quarterback that they both play the game the exact same way. They've got that similar type of art talent. So it's a coin flip between these two guys, in my opinion, right now in their careers. They're the same. But of course, I'll wear the pewter colors and I'll take Baker.
All right. I love it. So I think that puts him at 9 by my math.
That's about where I would have him going into this season. And certainly it's hard to totally, like when you do quarterback rankings, you try to say to yourself, all right, well, starting a team from scratch, like you said there, or, like taking them out of their offensive system. And it's hard. Like, it's so hard to do that. Like knowing what you sort of like where they are and how much success you're trying to predict for them for the upcoming season. I think Baker's in a perfect spot. And I know we'll talk about sort of the changes that they have at offensive coordinator and everything, but it was really productive last year. I think this year is going to be even better. I really do.
All right. I don't think it's crazy. It's just fun to see him in that spot again.
Yeah.
Let's get into the change in offensive coordinator. You came on here and told us, don't worry, Liam Cohen's going to be awesome. And you nailed that last year. So I'm curious if you have the same optimism this time around with Josh Grizzard, which is an elite name, or if you're a little more worried about it this time.
Yeah, the grizzly bear. I have no idea if people call him that or not. But look, I'm a little more nervous about it just because I felt more confident about Liam Cohen's background, with him calling plays at Kentucky, spending some time with the Los Angeles Rams, going back to Kentucky and then getting a shot in the NFL. I remember people talking about Liam Cohen as a guy to know his first stint when he was the offensive coordinator at Kentucky. So I've been kind of keeping this guy on my radar for a long time, and then he becomes the offensive coordinator of the Buccaneers. And certainly for a team that is led by Todd Bowles, much more of a defensive guy, and they were kind of trying to figure out what their next identity was going to be after Bruce Arians no longer there. Obviously Byron Leftwich no longer there either. And I had a lot of faith in the background and just everything that I had known about Liam Cohen. Grizzard was with Miami before he was with Tampa Bay. He was, I think, their wide receivers coach, and then he was a quality control coach, and he was the pass game coordinator. I think that varies the responsibilities from team to team when you already have an offensive coordinator and a play caller there. But I like the familiarity, right? Even though I don't have as much confidence in him as a coach as I did for Liam Cohen, I do think it was the right hire if they think that all things were equal and he was a legitimate candidate, because you're keeping things the same. And very clearly the offense was great last year. Now, it wasn't perfect, but clearly you had the number one part about being an offensive coordinator, an offensive designer, whatever it is. You have to get your quarterback to be confident. Like, that is number one. Your quarterback has to be confident. And Baker Mayfield, obviously we all know, he is a confident dude anyways. But to operate the way that he did and have that sort of confidence last year, if Grizzard gives them that baseline, that foundation again, then in my opinion, it would have been the right hire there for them. So not as known of a name as Cohen, but I do feel good about it for this year.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I feel like there's just a list inside the NFL of anybody that's been in that coaching tree, the McVay tree. And it's just like, you just kind of like keep climbing up until your name gets called. It's like a waiting list.
Right, exactly. Yeah. That is the way that it feels. McVay, the Shanahan tree, obviously, which McVay is a part of, but anything like that.
All right, let's talk about someone I know is one of your favorite players, Bucky Irving. I'm sure you were just popping champagne when he ended up a Buck last year. So I want to get another kind of like stock check on him from you here. So I was looking at his like fantasy draft position here. And I don't do too much fantasy content, but I think it's a fun way to frame the conversation here. So, so he's currently going as RB9, which is like back end of round 2, depending on your league format. He's going ahead of like Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor, Kyron Williams, maybe some more like established RB1 types. So I'm curious if for you're looking at this like full send, like, yep, you'll take them back end of round 2 ahead of some of those other names, or should there maybe be a little more pause on the hype there?
No, I think Bucky Irving's the real deal. I really do. And, they went into last season and I think they were figuring out a couple of things, because when Dave Canales was there as the offensive coordinator, they didn't know exactly what type of an offensive line or a rushing attack they wanted to be. They didn't know if they wanted to be more like, okay, do we want to be more inside, like inside or mid zone rushing? Do we want to be an outside zone rushing team? Do we want to kind of just beat people with power and gap style blocking scheme up the middle, more between the trenches kind of a thing? And I think it really took Canales like a lot of that season when he was the offensive coordinator to kind of figure it out. And even then, like, I wouldn't say that they ended that season when he was offensive coordinator knowing what their identity was. They just stayed very balanced and they did a lot of different things. And I think a lot of things went into that. Certainly offensive line not being as good as it is now. And then also not having Bucky Irving yet, I think went a long way into that. So they entered the 2024 season and Liam Cohen's now the offensive coordinator. And through the first, I would say 6 weeks of the season, they kind of operated in the same way that Canales did. They kind of evenly split things with outside zone and mid zone, as well as, power in between the tackles type of blocking. And they were giving Rachaad White a lot of the outside zone stuff. And they were giving Bucky Irving a lot more of the man and gap scheme blocking concepts, more between the tackles, some power running. And as we got to midway through the season, it was very clear the Bucs were much better blocking for those power blocking concepts. And because of that, Bucky Irving's numbers were a lot better than Rachaad White's. So I think that naturally they were giving the ball more to Bucky, but then they were also leaning more into the style of blocking that they clearly were executing better with the offensive line. And I think that second half of the season, with him being like becoming really their lead back, they just leaned on him more and more and had more and more success in the rushing game. Now I think they know that. Now I think they know what their identity is. And so moving into this year, even though they have other backs on the roster, Sean Tucker, Rachaad White, guys like that, like it is the Bucky Irving show. They are going to give this guy the ball. His missed tackles forced per attempt, his yards after contact numbers, which we love to lean on PFF to sort of individualize how good those running backs are independent of their offensive line. Those numbers were really great for him when he was at Oregon. Those numbers remain really great for him when he was a rookie. And he's also great in the receiving game as well. They're not afraid to let this guy play on third down, be a pass protector for you, be a pass catcher for you. And so to me, he is a 3-down back, and they're going to use him appropriately. I think that he is in for another major workload this season, and it does not shock me at all that people are picking him there in that range in fantasy.
Yeah, and I noticed Rachaad White's a little banged up right now. It doesn't seem like it's anything serious, but if anything did happen to Rachaad White, you might be talking about like RB1 territory, because he is going to lose some of those third down reps for sure there, but that's just for this year. And then it's probably, I don't know if they'd bring Rachaad White back or not, but
I would think probably not, just because again of so much of what Bucky can do. And if you have the opportunity to just draft a guy on a rookie contract, you're probably going to do that.
Yeah. Well, I knew you'd appreciate any kind of platform to rave about Bucky Irving.
Thank you.
You jump at the opportunity at that. All right, let's talk about their first round pick, Emeka Egbuka. Where did you settle on him coming out? What were your thoughts when you hear that name come off the board for Tampa?
Yeah, he was just into my top 20 on my overall big board. So I liked Emeka Egbuka a lot, and it felt like as we were getting closer to the draft, I just kept saying like, man, without Jeremiah Smith on that Ohio State team, I mean, we're talking about this guy being maybe even the best wide receiver in this class, right? We've talked about him and the production that he would have had over the last couple of seasons if he wasn't a little banged up, and then if Jeremiah Smith wasn't there. So I thought he was a really, really good player. Never in a million years thought the Bucs would have picked him.
Yeah.
Never. I mean, when we were doing the PFF draft show, we were in commercial when the pick came through and I saw it. And I wish we weren't, because my jaw hit the floor. I could not, because they just brought Godwin back, right? They just signed Godwin, and obviously Mike's going to play for a couple more years. Jalen McMillan looked good for them. And then they go in the first round and they draft Emeka Egbuka. And when you think about Jason Light, and I think I'll probably reference this article a couple of times here, Dan Pompei, he does a really great job just covering the NFL and writing a lot of really great stories. He wrote a piece on Jason Light, and one of the things that he shed a light on is how, full pun intended, is how they go through their draft process and the types of players that they bring into the organization now, and how, how as draft guys, we always talk about, well, don't pigeonhole yourself into picking certain players just because like you have a certain need. The Light and their staff, the staff in Tampa, they almost are the big board for them is basically almost just like, hey, who's the best football players? Like, doesn't really matter. Doesn't really
Yeah.
matter, whether we have a need here or not. Is this the best football player available for us at this point in time? And if it is, they're going to pick him. And I think the Egbuka pick is sort of evidence to that. And so I could not believe it, but I'll tell you, man, they're going to have one of the best wide receiver trios in the NFL, if not the best wide receiver trio in the NFL, when Godwin ends up coming back from his injury and can get back to full strength. Because I think that Egbuka is a borderline wide receiver 1 in the NFL. I do. And now you have 3 players on your roster that are borderline, if not solidified, wide receiver 1s in the NFL in other situations. And I think that's that hopefully is a recipe for a lot of points. So yeah,
for sure. I did want to revisit the fantasy angle on him a little bit too, though, because like this stood out to me. He is going 7th round ahead of Chris Godwin, 3 rounds ahead of Chris Godwin. He's going ahead of Chris Olave, Matthew Golden, who is interesting. I think he has a clear path to being, the leading target getter. But right. Jerry Jeudy, Jacoby Myers, which was ironically my pro comp on Egbuka. I had supercharged Jacoby Myers.
Okay.
And then Jaden Reed. So like that's like saying, okay, you're drafting him, you're plugging him in as one of your core starters.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? Like like in a redraft type of setting?
Yeah.
Just with Godwin coming back. I'm curious if you would pull the trigger on him in that type of a spot.
So Mayfield had the 5th most passing attempts last season. So like the volume is going to be there, especially with McMillan now missing time with his neck injury. Certainly you're going to feel really good about it, I think, through the first 4 weeks of the season. And then whenever Godwin kind of really gets back into the mold, then into the fold, then you get into, okay, what's the targets look like for him week in and week out? But even with a team that wanted to stay decently balanced last year, they still threw the ball a lot. And for as much as I think the Bucs defense is going to be better this season, I still think that they're going to have to be in some shootouts at certain points throughout this season. I think that when you list off those names, Olave, I would think from a whole season standpoint, if he's fully healthy, probably gets a higher volume. I think Matthew Golden absolutely does. So like Golden being in that group of like guys that Egbuka's getting drafted over, that's very curious to me, because I think that Golden's, outside of Jaden Reed getting, I think the sort of the same touches that he did last year. I think basically everything else is going to Matthew Golden.
He's the only guy healthy right now too.
Yeah.
In that receiver room. So they're going to hit the ground running.
Yeah. So I think that he probably deserves a little bit more respect for the ADP in fantasy, but I can understand why people are bullish on Egbuka, because whether he's getting, 4 targets a game, 6 targets a game, 9 targets a game, like whatever it is, I think they're going to be advantageous targets, like whether it's red zone stuff or big catches. Like they're going to lean on him a lot, like I said, especially in the early part of the season. So there are a lot of fantasy strategies, especially in redraft format, where you say to yourself, like, okay, I want to start out of the gate hot, and then I can sort of work the waiver wire or trades, after week 4 or 6, and I can figure out what kind of roster I want going into the playoffs. Egbuka at least gives you right now a really good case to start him as like a wide receiver 2 type of a player. And so I can understand it from that regard from fantasy.
Totally. All right, let's talk a little bit about Tristan Wirfs. Just kind of what's your panic meter with this injury? They do have some tough games out the gate. I think Eagles, Seahawks, and big Falcons game week 1.
Yeah.
So what's your kind of panic meter for how that kind of pumps the brake on the season, how they can manage that injury a little bit?
Yeah. It's not a guarantee that he's going to start the year on the PUP list. So there is a world where he could come back. I don't think he's playing week 1. But there is a world where like he could start practicing and maybe he's playing like week 3, week 4, and you feel good about it. Because you got to remember, like if they put you on the physically unable to perform list, you can't even practice for the first 4 weeks. So even if you get activated, they get activated and they probably feel good about Tristan Wirfs. I don't know how much practice he necessarily needs, but it's no guarantee that you immediately play even the next week. That's just when your practice window opens up. So if he's not on the PUP list, which it's not a guarantee that he is, I feel a little bit better about it. But all that to say, I don't think that Charlie Heck is a starting offensive tackle in the NFL, and he struggled throughout the preseason. So, you're in trouble at that point. But Scott Reynolds, my old boss over at Pewter Report, I was just chatting with him about it, sort of asking him sort of what he thought about the Wirfs timeline. And he was telling me like, hey, it's obviously not ideal, but you got to remember, like, Justin School gave up, what was it, 4 sacks to Aiden Hutchinson in week 2 against the Lions last year. Like, he looked horrendous. Like, he looked like he was not.
To be fair, everybody that faced Aiden Hutchinson last year gave up 4 sacks.
And that is true. But like, that happened. Bucs still won the game. So it's like, it's not 100% a kiss of death, but of course, like, it's not good when you go from all pro Tristan Wirfs to Charlie Heck, who I don't think is a starting caliber offensive tackle. So I'm not hitting the panic button too hard, just because it does seem like they are optimistic about Wirfs coming back within the first couple of weeks in the season. But there's no doubt about it that when he is not out there, they will have to do some game planning around that. The tight ends are going to have to be towards that side of the line of scrimmage. The running backs are going to have to be towards that side of the line of scrimmage, because they're going to have to help. And that sort of changes things a little bit. But again, that goes back to why the Igbokwe pick ended up being so good for them, because when you have to sort of change your scheme to help out your offensive line, well, then you have to have wide receivers that can win one-on-one a little bit better. And I think that you've got 2 good ones in Mike Evans and Igbokwe who could do that out of the gate.
Yeah, that was definitely, the injury news came out and I was like, hold on, do the Packers play the Bucs this year? Is it week 2, week 3? That'd be nice. Unfortunately not. All right, let's talk a little defense here. You hinted at it earlier, but yeah, the defense had their struggles last year. Obviously, a lot of injuries they had to go through. Recent point, I like felt bad for the Bucs, because I was like, man, I was so wrong about how good this team is playing and how things are coming together. But like, they had so many guys out with injuries.
Yeah,
they weren't able to be the best version of themselves. But they finished, at least by DVOA standards, 16th in total defense and 23rd in pass defense last year. What were a couple things that went wrong last year? If you want to get into the injury stuff, you can. But if there was anything else too that you'd like to see them do a little differently.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the injuries didn't help them, and it kind of sucked, because I thought that they were in a really great slugfest against the Commanders last year in the playoffs in that wild card round. And very clearly, just as we got into the 3rd and 4th quarter of that game, it was like, they're just too hurt. Like, they're too hurt going up against a really good Commanders team, and they just weren't able to keep up with them, which is a shame, because I would have liked to see those 2 teams fully healthy. I know everybody does in this game of football.
Yeah,
like, I understand. But when you look at last year, a couple of things really went wrong. And it's a couple of things. It's one at every single level of the defense. On the defensive line, they couldn't get after the passer. They did not have a premium pass rusher. I think the Yaya Diaby is a good pass rusher, but they didn't have this game record type of a pass rusher who could really consistently get after the quarterback, even when Diaby was out there. Kalijah Cansey went through his injuries as well. He was on and off the field, and they just did not have that player who could get after the quarterback the way that they needed to. This year they have Hassan Reddick, so they're hoping that obviously he's going to be able to step up in that regard. At the second level, they didn't have Savasier Dennis, which ended up being really, really crucial for them, because he was supposed to be that second-year linebacker who they were really excited about to play next to Levante David and be a really nice 1-2 combo in the middle of that defense. Dennis only played 4 games last year because of a shoulder injury, and they were very thin behind him. They didn't really have any options. And I would say in the secondary, for all of the, the injuries that some of the secondary players ended up having, like Antoine Winfield Jr. is one of them, but like Antoine Winfield Jr. also just did not have a good year. Like, he was battling through injury, I know that, but like he just straight up did not have nearly as good of a year as that he could have as an all-pro caliber player. And so because of this, they were the 6th worst team in the NFL in overall PFF coverage grade when it came to defending the middle of the field. That was because they did not have the horses at linebacker, and they just did not have the safeties to make it happen. And I think that statistic is a big reason why they wanted to move Tyke Smith, who was really good in the nickel for them last year as a run defender. They wanted to move him back to safety. So now he is going to be playing safety with Antoine Winfield Jr. You're hoping that Winfield Jr. is more healthy this season. And now they're hoping that Jacob Parrish, their rookie that they drafted from Kansas State, can now fill in the nickel, which he's done pretty well in the preseason. But that is the vision that they have for this team, to be much better in the middle of the field. Dennis is back and fully healthy, and they've liked how he has looked throughout the offseason. You're hoping that Winfield Jr. bounces back. Now you got Tyke Smith next to him, and you're hoping that Hassan Reddick can get after the quarterback a little bit faster than the guys that they had last year.
You're just like the draft Nick in me is like just like, yeah, keep going. Servasia Dennis, Tyke Smith, Jacob Parrish, Anton Winfield. Like these are all my
Yeah.
dudes.
Just wait till Ben
Unfortunately,
Morrison gets out there competing for
Ben
outside
Morrison,
cornerback reps.
David Walker was a bummer too, man. Oh, I love
dude.
David Walker. Oh,
They were so pumped about him too. I remember talking with some people who cover that team pretty closely, and they were all like, okay, David Walker's like going to be a player this season. And then he ends up getting hurt. And now he's missing the year, which is
that was just twisting the knife. You hate to see
tough.
Cool. Well, that was all my Bucs related questions. I was going to ask you a little more about Servasia Dennis, but I think you covered that well. Like he's going to be hopefully healthy and starting and be good there at that level.
Yeah.
I while I have you, I'm curious, keeping it inside the NFC South here, but you got Michael Penix and Bryce Young, hopefully going to make this division a little bit more interesting this year.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like maybe who are you fearing a little bit in this NFC South? What are your takes on those two quarterbacks this year?
Yeah. I think the team that I'd be worried about the most is the Falcons, just because how Penix ended the year just as an absolute flamethrower. Like it makes me feel as though you look at that offensive line, you look at him now stepping in as the full-time starting quarterback. Bijan Robinson is obviously unbelievable, one of the best backs in the NFL. Like I think that team's going to score a lot of points. Do I still think the defense is going to struggle for them? Yes, but at least they got a lot more athletic, especially in the front seven. So there's going to be some weeks where that athleticism just shows up a lot, and they'll be able to get after the quarterback pretty well. So even though I think it's still going to be high variance for them, I think they're going to score a lot of points. And I think there's going to be some weeks where the defense can really show up with how fast that they play. I like the things that Carolina did this offseason, and I think that Carolina is going in the right direction. I think that it's a battle for second place because I do, all bias aside, I do think the Bucs are the strongest team in that division, and I think they should win it again. I think that the Falcons will finish this year like one, maybe two games better than the Carolina Panthers. Like I could see this being like Carolina finishes with 7 wins, the Falcons finish with like 8 or 9 wins, something like that. And I think the Saints are going to take a big step back. I really do. They're my sneaky team to potentially get the number 1 overall pick this year. Not that I don't like Kellen Moore. I think the Kellen Moore is going to be fine.
Yeah.
I just don't.
Well, it's bad because there's no Saints fans out there that are like, oh, you're snubbing us. Like Saints fans know what the deal is. Like they know they're going to suck this year.
And it's time, right? Like it's time to it's time to pay the bills. It's time to bite the bullet. Get the cap space right, turn the page entirely, and sort of just take your lumps with this year and end up starting a different era. I think next year is what this team's going to end up doing. But anyways, I'm not worried about Carolina's offense, really. I think the offensive line is solid. I like Tetro McMillan a lot. I like Chuba Hubbard. I think that Jatavian Sanders can take the next step for them. And I like how much confidence Bryce played with last year. So I think the offense is going to be good for them. I'm still nervous about the defense. I'm still nervous about the defense, specifically at the second level. And they've got to figure it out as a pass rushing unit. And so far in the preseason, they haven't. And I know that that's not the starters that are out there full time, but it's a lot of young guys that they're leaning on, especially for that edge pressure. And so to me, I think that the Panthers are still a year away from really being serious contenders in that division. But I think that a year from now, the 2026 season, we really could be talking about a 3-team race with the Bucs, the Falcons, and the Panthers. And it could be, like it's anybody's division. And I think that could be a lot of fun.
All right. Awesome. Trevor, this was a blast. Thank you so much. Everybody definitely check out all of the work Trevor's got going on. It's crazy how much content you're putting out with PFF and the stock exchange. It's all good stuff. Anything else you got before we get out of here?
No, just those 2 things, man. I'm super excited about the season. Really ready to get it going. Any draft nicks out there, which I know if people are watching your channel, you covered the draft so well. So I know they're in on the draft, but we're going to have over 250 players on the PFF mock draft simulator by the time that week 1 gets kicked off. So any sickos out there, you want to, dip your toe in the water a little bit, the draft season, come on over to pff.com. We got you guys.
That's amazing. That's amazing. You are the ultimate sicko. 250 players before the season even starts. That's just insane.
I love it, man. I love it. I really do.
Yep. All right, Trevor, this was a blast. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Marcus. Anytime, my friend.
So thank you, Trevor, as always, for joining the Bucs Deep Dive. Everybody do make sure you're following Trevor and all of his good work if you're not already for some reason. But yeah, let's get into our recap team summary segment here, and then we will finish up taking a look at their schedule and what that could mean for their win total expectations this year. But at the end of the day, I have the Bucs as a tremendously balanced team. They get B+ grades all the way down the board. Their overall team ranking, the offense, the defense, the special teams, all well above average. And then when you break it down more into like strengths, weaknesses, and some of those like wild card pivotal factors, it's a pretty simplistic picture. They do have some core strengths. The weapons, the offensive line, their run defense, and the secondary are all like really good, firm strengths for them. And then even better, try to tell me what their true weakness is. The only thing I could come up with a legitimate weakness on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is the offensive line depth paired with the fact that Tristan Wirfs is going to start the season hurt. Like those first 4 weeks or so, they're going to have to scheme around it and work their way through. But then, like, as long as everybody's healthy, once Wirfs comes back, you eliminate that as a weakness. Again, as long as everybody's healthy, and this team doesn't have a weakness. They do have some like pivotal factors. You've got the new offensive coordinator. That's a big deal. Can they hit the ground running with him? The defensive line, I really don't think it's going to be a weakness for them, but can they hit some green lights and that D-line becomes more of a strength? That would allude to higher upside for this team. And then the linebackers as well. That's one that could really go either way, as we described. But yeah, one of the more balanced, complete teams in the league. Jason Light deserves so much credit with how he's constructed this roster, just nailing drafts and free agency left and right. I would say the most underrated general manager in the NFL. But with that, let's take a look at their schedule. Just how hard is it, and what does it mean towards this team's ability to maybe hit their Vegas over-under or go beyond that and win the Super Bowl this season as our 6th-ranked team. So their own division is a benefit to them. We didn't have any other teams in this division rank inside the top 20. Now, Atlanta and Carolina have some upside to be, even potential problems in this division, but at least right now you're expecting them to be favored in all of their division games, in my opinion. Then you draw the NFC West. A lot of solid to good teams in there. Can you go 2-2 against the NFC West? I think that's reasonable. And then you get the AFC East, including 2 home games against the Jets and the Patriots. So I would say their schedule definitely lands more on the easier side of things. It's not a cakewalk by any stretch of the imagination, but relative to a lot of these schedules that we've looked at, it's much less intimidating. So like for a team that I'm already, I think, higher on than consensus, like their over-under is 9.5 wins. I think it should be 10 or 10.5, especially with this schedule. But even just generally speaking, I think there's a lot of betting value on the Bucs with the over-under, with the division odds. Like they're even money to win this division. I think they should be pretty solid favorites to win this division. So I think there's value there. And then, man, I really think the conversation on this Bucs team does take another step up from a lot of these teams. So many of these teams, it's like, oh, can they go over on their over-under? Can they win their division? With the Bucs, I think, especially in the NFC, where you don't have to go through a gauntlet of elite quarterbacks, the opportunity for this team to be a Super Bowl team is there. So they're tied for 13th in Super Bowl odds, 25-1. I like that. I really like all the bets on this Bucs team, and their schedule it's harder to start, and that doesn't pair great with the Tristan Wirfs injury. Like maybe that factors in terms of like getting the 1 seed, helping you get a chance to win the Super Bowl for sure. Like they have Atlanta week 1. I still think they should win that game, but it does make things harder with Tristan Wirfs out in that game. That is technically your hardest division game, in my opinion, is at Atlanta. You have to go and play that combination of edge rushers in Houston week 2. The Jets pass rush is no joke, and then you got Philly week 4. So that's kind of the wild card here is like, is there a 1-3 start in there for Tampa? It's possible. But as long as they come out of that 2-2 to start the season, which they absolutely should, especially for a team that like they've played really well against Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, getting them at home week 4. They're not favorites in that game, but I think they can even win that one. And Tristan Wirfs could even be back for that game. So that's kind of the wild card is the first 4 weeks. But even with that, I still like the over because like, let's say they start 1-3 and they kind of hack and slash their way through the next 2 months and go 500. That could put them as bad as 5-7 as you head into that week 14 home game against New Orleans. But dude, look at that final 5 games. You got New Orleans at home, Atlanta at home, at Carolina, at Miami, and then Carolina at home week 18. Like they're big favorites at least in all of those games. So even if things start bad, that you go 5-7, you could be talking about playing your best football, getting hot. That's still a 5-game stretch that they could easily win all 5 of those games, go 10-7, and win this division and be in a good position to be playing their best football in January. And it's it never always plays out that way, the way you think the schedule will play out heading into the season. But that's one scenario, and that's kind of a worst case scenario to me. So very high on this Bucs team. I'm curious if you guys think I'm crazy for that, or if I maybe sold you on being higher on this Bucs team. I hope you guys did enjoy this deep dive. Very fun Tampa Bay team, in my opinion. But yes, we should be back probably Tuesday for the reveal of our number 7 team. And then it is officially like, blackout curtains on all the windows, full on cave mode. Like we are in the grimy grind to the finish line to finish these remaining deep dives. So really buckle up for the end of this series. Really appreciate you guys for watching. Please do hit that like button on the way out if you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys soon. Peace out.